What's up, gamers? Welcome to Battle Mallet Podcast, Episode 70, Nova 2024, The Friends We Made Along the Way. My name is Jerod Johnson. Tonight, I am joined by Trace Al Capone Hyde.
Hey, what's up?
Jason Tabled Noob Murray.
I am here.
You're Ron Burgundy.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
And returning / special guest, Danny Clemens.
Hey.
He's back.
Something like that.
So for anyone that isn't familiar, the Battle Mallet podcast is the journey of, I guess tonight, 4 busy gamers playing games that they love, balancing life with those games, and making their way to the Nova Open Convention every year. Tonight's episode is going to be our Nova 2024 recap. As a fair warning, we just want to let everyone know that this episode will probably be a bit rambly and the topics will be scattered. So if you are looking for specific content for a specific game, Underworlds, I would suggest that you check the show notes for timestamps, and that will jump you to the end of the episode where we will cover the Clash and mine and Jason's experiences in that. So I guess with the needful out of the way, we will do what we normally do, and we will pass the virtual mic around and talk about what we've been up to, we'll say, since Nova. Hobby-wise, gaming-wise, life-wise, and everything else. So, Trace, why don't you go first?
Is it a virtual mic if I actually have a mic?
It's one for the philosophers.
Semantics.
Okay. Just clearing that up before we get started. Since I've been back from Nova, I have started building a tiny Titan, and my life has been consumed by Space Marine.
Brother.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been nice to kind of step away or just do a little bit of casual hobby and not have any like deadlines looming. So that's what. And I've also been 3D printing a paint rack.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You did send pictures of that. It does. I like it. It looks very nice. Especially when you get everything all organized in the rainbow.
Yeah, it's going to look pretty good. I've got to do it's going to go on this wall right here.
Yeah.
Nice.
So he's pointing over his shoulder for all of our listeners.
So I'm excited to get that done. It requires me to paint up here, which I have not done yet. So that's going to be the first step before I actually mount that. And then everything else has been kind of set up, ready to go. I can hold 396 paints on that thing.
God damn.
396. The real question is the room up there going to get painted and the paint rack go up before the bookshelves are complete?
The bookshelves are done, sir.
Oh!
For 2 months now.
Whoa,
so you
got him.
Back the hell off.
The troll got trolled.
Yeah.
But that's really all I've been up to. Lots of pre-hobby and playing video games with friends and stuff like that. So it's been a nice little break from our trip. Jason, what have you been doing?
Working. So I don't know what the hell happened, to take a couple days off, but lots of work, lots of travel. As soon as we got back, I had rides and more rides, visitors, I should say. Executives with the company came in, and then family got in the way, which is Emmett and Aiden. We're already back to school. So for those that are not from North Carolina, we have year-round school. So they went back before we went to Nova. But then all the sports picked up. So flag football for the little man, first year for that. Volleyball, which I coached today, and that was super fun. The
Bump set spike.
The girls were super happy that Emma's dad was running practice. No, they were not.
Run the stairs.
How did you know? You must have been there. And then between dance, chorus, school, all that work, really not a lot of hobby, plus Space Marine. So Space Marine came out, and for those that don't know, Space Marine 1 is kind of like what got me back into 40K tabletop. So Space Marine, then moved on to this wonderful program called Vassal and played some 40K on that. Then I bought this codex, a Chaos Space Marine codex, because I wanted to play in that format. But in the back of that, there was like a list of shops like that, and we have one in Raleigh. And then I met these three knuckleheads, and the rest is history. So to have Space Marine back in my life is a good thing. It is in my opinion, a very well paced game. So you have the single player, which is fantastic. You can play that through with three people. You have a kind of a horde mode, which can also be played with three people. And then you have my favorite, which is PvP, which is 6v6. And when you work together, there is nothing like it. Class-based system, very methodical, not like this jump around Halo shooter shenanigans that we'll talk about later. But yeah, it's been fun. And then, post Nova, like I think like leading up to Nova 2, just to make this podcast about family and balancing life with those things, like there was a lot of family drama before we left for Nova. Some big personal milestones as far as family and life go. So I had to make some decisions before Nova. Made those decisions and really reset with you three and everyone else, but it was definitely a balance to get there. So, yeah, that's kind of post. Not what we did at Nova. Danny, what about you? What have you done since we went?
I've not played Space Marine, which annoys me because I really was excited about that game, but it came out at the worst possible time for me because I'm an officer in a World of Warcraft guild, and the new World of Warcraft expansion dropped like 2 weeks before that, and then the raid dropped like the same week that Space Marine came out, and it was like I don't have the time to play Space Marine and to do all of this crap. So I have not yet touched it, but the way you guys talk about it and the damn pictures of your customized Space Marines, like I don't even want to play the game. I just want to make a Black Templar and then jump around and be like, look at me. I look cool, but I know you have to do stuff to earn that. So it's like, well, it's a mess. So no Space Marine for me, but probably in the future, if we're being totally honest.
Yeah. How long do you think?
I don't know. Well, that's going to be the thing. It's like you guys are going to be like over it in 3 weeks. And then.
Okay. So it was 3 weeks. I got 3 weeks to play. Sounds good. All right. Great.
Yeah, that's when you leave as soon as I stink up the place. Yeah. But so there's been a lot of World of Warcraft. That was kind of my pre-Nova drama I was pre-release for the War Within. And I needed to get my main character at max level, like through everything that it could in like 36 hours before I had to like then work to do a bunch of stuff for Nova and then get out of town for a week. And so once I got back from Nova, it was kind of like, all right, I have my work to do, and then I have Warcraft, and then I have a wife. And that was about all I had time for. And then my wife left and went to London for a week and just got home yesterday. So it's been just me and the dogs for the most part.
Yeah, so then you got caught up in World of Warcraft. That was perfect, right?
Well timed.
She planned it that way.
Did you slam a bunch of Mountain Dew Zeros while you're by yourself?
I actually didn't, believe it or not, which was like, I thought of that because I told you guys about that. My wife has a joke that whenever she leaves town, obviously she knows she left, but she's like, but if I didn't know and I just showed up and had blacked out for a week and then came back home, I'd know I was out of town because the house is just littered with empty Mountain Dew Zero cans. So,
that's awesome.
No, I think at the ripe age of 37, I've decreased my Mountain Dew Zero intake these days. But although I don't know, I had like 2 of those like Starbucks cold brew, like big ones, like over the course of the week. So I'm not getting any better.
You should have just done the Mountain Dew Zeros.
Yeah, I know. But that's mostly been it at my end. How about you, Jerod?
Yeah, so basically nothing hobby-wise. A lot of Space Marine 2. And then just like the tiniest touch of WoW. It happens to me every expansion. Well, it's probably like every other expansion, I think, is what happens, is I get hooked and play long enough to get through the story and then realize that like that's all I really want from that game is like to learn more about what's going on in the world of Warcraft. But a ton of Space Marine 2. My kids are tracked out, so they started their track out like the week that we so we got back from Nova on Sunday, and they were tracked out on Monday. Oh no, they went back to school for a week, and then they've been tracked out for the past week. 2 weeks. I don't know.
This week.
Time.
It's 1 week. On the same track, Jerod. 1 week.
All right, there we go. Tracy's got me covered. I'm new to this year-round thing, so I don't know what's going on. But things got pretty hot at work like 2 weeks before Nova. Danny and I had tried to make plans to get some MCP games in, some cheeky like lunch MCP, and then a big fat project got dropped on me at work, and that's like Jason, like work has just been consuming, basically all of my extra brain power. So being able to kind of unplug and shoot heretics or shoot loyalists or chew up Tyranid with a chainsword has been a welcome release since Space Marine 2 launched. So I don't know if you can tell, but if you haven't picked it up and you are a fan of 40K or think that you might be a fan of 40K, I think that Space Marine 2 is an excellent entry point into the lore. The social channels have been blowing up, both X and Instagram and Facebook. Everybody's talking about Space Marine 2. There are people that have never seen the 40K lore, never seen Grimdark before. There's a pretty popular post on X now, I guess, where somebody's playing
Everything
it.
App.
Yeah, the app.
The X, the Everything app.
The Everything app.
Everything
But he's taking a screen grab of a cherub, on the battle barge, and his caption is literally, "What?"
Exactly.
That's all that it is. And so just seeing people, get exposed to this universe that we've been entrenched in for so long is pretty funny. And like the cherub is like, that's the tip of the iceberg. Like it's not in fact a lobotomized baby, but it's like a gene clone machine thing. Like it's pretty tame when it comes to 40K.
To bring you your ammo.
Yeah, wouldn't that be awesome in like multiplayer if they have, instead of an ammo crate, there's just a cherub that flies in.
And drops off your ammo.
Cherub drops in and gives you something.
Oh, that'd be sweet. All right. We need to send that off.
Just send
Sounds
it.
like the game is awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds
Terrible.
That sounds like an email to Saber is what that sounds like to me.
That's exactly what I'm writing it right now.
And like,
other than that.
And for you don't play multiplayer games, and you've been cooking pretty well playing the Devastator. I have to toot your horn a little bit.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I haven't run hard in a shooter since, really PvP since Destiny 1. Like I never really got into Destiny 2 PvP. So it's been a hot minute since I've run any kind of shooter with any kind of proficiency, I would say. And I don't know why, but the Heavy Bolter and the Iron Halo, I've really been enjoying that and had fun. And I've had good teammates, good battle brothers.
Yeah, there's those moments for the wingman. Like a lot of games provide those, but like this, playing what is it, a Vanguard? You shoot like the grappling hook like at someone, and Jerod's like shooting him, and that'll stun him. So like Jerod's about to die, you hit him with that, and then they're stuck in front of a Devastator, which is not a place you want to be. So
nope.
And then pulling out, like playing domination and losing, like only 10 points away from losing, and pulling a triple cap and winning by like 2 points was pretty epic as well. So
yeah, that one was awesome.
Not to get everybody else to play, but you should come join us. It's really fun.
It is. We're in the Discord for the audio, so you could just listen in and have no idea what's going on visually, and just listen to Jason yell at me about which point I should be trying to cap or falling back from. Or
I've been tame. I don't want to hear yelling. I've been very tame.
You have been tame. You have been very tame. Good guidance. Good comms. Yeah, but I think that's it. So why don't we take a break here? Go buy Space Marine 2. And when we come back, we will start diving into the Nova adventure.
And we're back. And welcome to what we prepare all year for, our road to Nova, getting to Nova, and experiencing the games, fulfilling all those needs, and making friends along the way. So this year, given my pre-Nova family drama, family life happens items, not really drama, like serious life changes within the family, I didn't drive, so we had to go back to like old school.
It
And
was old school.
So Jerod drove. We went up on Wednesday, but the other anomaly that I think hasn't happened since Jerod drove the first time, all four of us were in the car going up.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a fun adventure. One of the biggest things on going to a con or event like that is traveling with like-minded individuals playing games. So lots of great conversation from movies to life to the games that we were looking forward to. Jerod did a great job driving. We did not have to drive on the other side of the street when we got into DC because we were so early. This was like the earliest we've ever arrived on a Wednesday. I think we could have helped every vendor and or person set up.
We could have been the barons of dice.
we could have. But like a couple changes to the venue this year, just from a layout standpoint, that I think we could cover now. But same hotel as the previous year, but where they put stuff was a little bit different. Anything kind of stand out to anybody of the changes of just the layout of the event?
I mean, I think the biggest thing of note is the location of the board game lounge. So last year it was in like the lowest level, the basement, same level as the 40K hall, and the same level as the demos. And so this year, and it was crowded. It felt a little cramped. This year it was up one level, which put it like right in the middle of all of the traffic. So you either had to walk right by it or even go through it to get to some events, to get to like, if you were on the 40K hall, you had to go upstairs to get like to the AOS hall or further up to get to the lobby, to get to your room. And there was a lot more space in the board game lounge. And I think because of the space and the location, it was like always busy. Like it was hopping the whole con, and it was awesome.
Standing
I think it
room
was because
only.
you were in there.
I mean, I wasn't going to say it.
Game recognized game, Jerod.
Yeah.
One of the
But it
things
was cool because they had a lot of different layout, like tables laid out in the board game lounge. So, last year it was a lot of like round tops, and this year there were still a lot of round tops, but there are also a lot of like long, almost what I would call like tournament style tables set up, that you could play like a Magic the Gathering tournament or other small format tournament. And so we grabbed one of those sets of long tables. Well, I'll let Danny comment on this. We started at one table. Danny, do you remember why we moved?
Oh, it was so cold. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh my goodness. How did I talk about trauma blacking out? Like that was unbelievable. Oh, I'm holding my head right now. I forgot about that. So yeah, I'm a baby. I don't like being anything below like 70 degrees is frigid for my little tender skin. And we were sitting directly under the coldest air conditioning vent known to mankind, to the point where I was wearing a t-shirt with like a light like denim button up that I just kind of opened. And then I went upstairs and got like a corduroy jacket. And I sat there, and about 20 minutes later, I was still freezing cold. And I finally said something, and all these guys were like, yeah, it is cold. It's like, well, why am I the one suffering here? But it was frigid. That was really cold, which ended up working out over the course of the weekend, because once there was more bodies in there, it kind of balanced. But when it was just like 5 of us, they did not need it cranking that hard.
Yeah, it was cold.
Yeah. So we ended up moving, and we took over like 3, I guess I would call like probably 3 6-foot like folding tables.
That sounds right.
And when I say took over, like we took over, as we go through this week, we'll talk about, the friends that we made along the way. But like my brother and his partner showed up, some of the crew from Madison, Wisconsin, part of the What the Hex podcast, for any of our listeners that are familiar, came down. And we basically took over an area of the board game lounge that was like base camp for the rest of the week. But the library at the board game lounge was much larger this year, and they had play to win options. So they had unsealed games, and you could, if you were the first one to sign up for it, you could grab the game, play it, put it back on the shelf, and by playing the game, your name got on a list to be drawn to potentially win that game at the end of the week. So like, no money down, just come hang out in the board game lounge, play this game, and you could take a game home, which was awesome. That was so cool.
I feel like that was the one organized thing that they had in the board game lounge that was kind of a hit. Because I feel like they tried to do the like Dice Throne tournament, and there was only a couple people there for that. I think at one point they had maybe it was Magic. That had some card thing, and it wasn't many people there for that. And then Liar's Dice was a little bit smaller this year, but that like there were people constantly taking stuff off that play to win shelf.
That was cool. It was cool. What else? Anything else on the layout or game that was there as we walked the halls on Wednesday that grabbed anyone?
So one of the things that I noticed when we were there, and Jerod, you kind of called this out, like last year, the vendor hall seemed kind of cramped. But the reason why that was is because when we were on that second floor, they had those curtains pulled up to where the stairwell was.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it was like half the hall. So they had half the hall that was blocked off, I guess for like product or whatever, to sit back there and not have to worry about stuff. But they opened that whole space up, and so that's why it felt so much bigger. It's because they opened all that space up for all the board gamers to sit up there instead of being just half of the room for the vendors. That's why it was so different.
Yeah. Half of that square footage was blocked off by that pipe and drape.
That's right.
Last year.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but then the vendors were downstairs in the basement level this year.
Yep.
But I think that was great because it was also the same floor that all of the demo setups were.
And it was also the same floor that the largest event that was at the con was, which was 40K. So you had the most traffic. It made the most sense for the vendors to be down there getting all that 40K traffic. So I agree. I think the layout was better this year than it was last year for sure.
Yeah, and then just
I don't remember. I wasn't there for much of last year, so maybe this was 2023. But I was impressed that they had kind of spread all the food out too. Like they had food buffets like on the 40K. I think on both sides of the 40K hall. And there's a bunch of different locations where they had those little mini buffets, which I think kept the crowd dispersed in a really nice way.
Yeah, I don't ever think I had to like wait if I got something from one of the buffets or whatever from my raging about breakfast sandwiches.
Yeah, and there wasn't like a huge crowd to walk through or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the layout of the food and drinks was much more like adjacent to the larger events, which I think helped the flow.
Yeah,
instead of pulling people away all to like one station. The one I do want to mention the one negative that I had on the layout, right?
Yeah,
the hotel or whatever. It was parking this year. So parking was weird last year. Like just the parking lot in general is strange. It's like, big city under a hotel type of parking ramp, which means lots of columns and lots of weird angles. But this year being so early, being mid-Wednesday, we had a hard time finding a parking space.
Yeah.
So
we did. And apparently, so from murmurings that I heard throughout the rest of the weekend, it was like under the hotel parking was basically full for the rest of the week. Like there were a bunch of people that had to go to all of the overflow parking. So
that would be my only negative coming in on Wednesday. And then just to fill out for those that couldn't attend. So you have the lobby of the hotel, right? And if you go to the back of the lobby of the hotel, there are events there. Like there's like Bloodbowl and like the hobby hangout area, which Army Painter sets up, has a whole bunch of paints and items that you could do to repair some items. I mean, if that had to happen, but
is that a teaser?
So there's that with the seminars. Then you go down to I don't even know what level it is, but one below the lobby, terrace, I think it was called.
Terrace, yep.
Terrace level, yep, that's right.
And then you have the big AOS hall, which is Middle Earth, AOS, Shatterpoint, Star Wars, the other
World.
Legion.
Star Wars Legion, Old World. And that's where the board game lounge was. And then you go down one more level and you have the huge 40K hall, which is all things 40K, kill team, narrative, all that. And then the other side of that hall is another hallway with small seminar rooms, which is MCP, Legion, Imperialis, Infinity. Those type of games were down that way. And then this year there was even more up. So if you went up one level, they had on level 1, there was D&D rooms and Star Wars. Oh my goodness, Star Wars, the fleet game. Armada, thank you. And the AOS narrative. So the convention definitely grew this year because I don't recall anything being on level 1.
I think there was stuff in that room that we ended up going to on the Saturday night when we all did that floor had a couple rooms that I never went to. But
that was level 1.
That was level 1. They were way tucked back there too.
They were.
Like I felt like I was in a different building by the time I got there.
Yeah.
So that kind of that's the layout, what we liked of the layout, what we may have not liked of the layout. Wednesday we went for dinner to Across the Pond, which is a great little pub down the road. We've hit that last year. It was great to be back there again.
Same one guy running the joint.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
And then the one we tried to go back there another night later on in the week, and he wasn't there, and there was a line. That man keeps it going.
Yeah, he's the oil.
Yeah, I went another night too, and it was a different guy, and he was stressed out, man. It was very very different.
So good. So that night, Wednesday night when we got there, we go to. I'm going to kind of skip the game that we played. We'll talk about that last. But the reason we come up on Wednesday is for the hype that is the GW preview. So we all go in there, and we get these little cards
and a coupon
and a
coupon. Tasty coupon.
So these cards are tarot cards. They hand them out as everyone's walking in. And, I just thought it was like a piece of swag. But then we sit down and we start noticing that not every tarot card is created equal. And then the hype begins. Because, Jerod, what tarot card did you have?
I'm trying to remember. I think originally I had the Galaxy.
Okay.
I had Galaxy.
Oh, so there was a double Galaxy.
Oh, interesting.
I had Galaxy as well. We had triple Galaxy.
Galaxy.
Then I didn't have Galaxy. I had something else then.
Yours was Knight.
I had the Knight. That's right. Yep.
The Knight.
So we had the Knight, 2 the Galaxies, and then Jason.
I had the Astartes. I'm an Astartes. All you guys just aspiring to be Astartes. But anyway, throughout the crowd, people were trading these cards, and I think a couple of you guys traded it. Jared, didn't you end up with the Tree of Life or something?
I did. Yep. I got the Tree of Life.
I traded for the Despoiler. Ooh. Which I was like, well, this one sounds like it could be important.
Spicy.
Yep.
I didn't trade. I just kind of sat on mine.
Trace is like the Galaxy for the win. Because I'm going to be honest, I thought these tarot cards were going to be like the show. I thought at the end, if you have the Astartes, here is a complete line, a company of Space Marine miniatures for you, just for getting this tarot card.
That might be a little rich.
I'm sitting there. I'm ready.
You get one Astarte. You are the Astarte.
Yeah.
But they tried with the preview, so I don't believe we have to go into detail, but they tried some new things. They tried some Kahoot.
Well, all right. So the one thing, and it was fun, is so if you have participated if you've watched the live stream of a preview, usually the moderators are running trivia before, right? Like it's just for fun, for bragging rights. Well, in this case, they actually ran similar trivia questions based on product line, but they kept score. So it was like an online, web app.
It's
So you
called
could actually
Kahoot. It's called Kahoot.
called Kahoot. But people actually won, and so like people won like boxes of Skaventide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Skaventide boxes. There was Skaventide boxes, and then there was kill teams, and then spearheads. They had
Spearheads. Yeah. So I mean, like legit prizes for knowing your stuff in the trivia. But leading up to Nova, one of the things that we noticed was that a lot of the previews at other events were just getting canceled. So we didn't even know if we were going to have a preview. And then Jason, I don't know if you want to give your thoughts on. No, he's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. We wonder for Games Workshop if maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze when it comes to producing the previews, for getting staff out for the previews, whatever the case is. But Nova had one this year, and we got to hear from the designers of the games, which is, I think, always cool. As they talk about new lines.
Some of the pre-recorded stuff was interesting, so I don't want to take anything away from that. And like, because you're going to put it out there, I guess I have to elaborate on it. Like, GW is a business, right? Like, so what does the preview generate from a revenue return standpoint? And that's where the coupon comes in. They open the shop that's at the event. Like, that's where they get their return from these events. But labor is the number one cost to any company, and to put on these live events is not cheap. Now, Nova is not a GW event, right? It's an independent tournament. So, but I do think that that's where some of the content is not as in depth as it was before, because that can be released in different mediums, which does not cost as much capital investment to produce. Or if you do produce, you use it in multiple streams, like they are doing for the previews and the online previews and such. Because to my knowledge, there was like 3 event staff there. So just a, tinfoil hat. Again, it was nice. It's an ebb and flow. And I was very appreciative that Nova was lucky enough to have a preview go on. But we'll see where those go going forward.
And it's always cool to like see the stuff on a big screen with the big speakers and all that stuff. Like there is a novelty value into seeing it at a higher quality like that. But it was definitely, it was a far cry from my first ever GW preview where Sisters of Battle were taped under our chairs.
Yes, that's true. And the likes of Adam Troke and Andy Chambers and Jay Clare.
There was a bunch of people there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
a bunch of GW staff
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jason, what you're saying is that you would like to see a roadmap of the previews for the next year?
Yes, give me a roadmap of the previews that you're going to show me a roadmap in.
There will be models.
There will be
released by a model making company sometime over the course of the next year.
Perfect.
But I also like, all right, like, so, but my tinfoil hat is, I think they're going to pivot the preview, like a real substantial preview, like we had back in the day at Nova, to their own events.
Yeah, I think so too. Because they're already going to have their staff there. It's not like they're having to fly out other people, and it's their stuff. It's their stuff.
Another drawing point, right? Like it's another reason to come to their tournaments rather than something else.
Yep, I agree.
And again, all that with, they gave away a lot of stuff. Like,
yeah, I don't want to come off like I'm not trying to be glib here. It's just, there was some funny things that I think everybody, even if you probably got the GW people that run these events in a cone of truth, and they're like, "Hey, were you satisfied with that?" I don't think that a lot of them would be like, "Oh yeah, that was an amazing preview. Like it was one of the best we ever did."
Sure.
So, but then we leave there. We walk through the Warhammer shop as we always do. But we also got to play a game this wonderful evening. It was our first game in the board game lounge, where we're all freezing, even me as the furnace of the group. I was cold. Danny, you want to walk us through it?
Yeah. So this is a game that I bought on a whim. It's called Marvel Remix because it had the Marvel branding. So your boy bought it. I am an easy mark. And it's super fun. I really like it. I think there's a kind of sneaky level of depth to it that makes it super replayable, but it's really simple. And basically you have 2 decks of cards, and each player starts the game with a hand of 7 cards. And those cards can be heroes, sidekicks, locations, equipment, and villains. I think and like maybe events. There's a couple things, and they're all worth different values, but then they'll also have kind of subtext that'll say, if teamed with another, Avenger, multiply by 2, or if in a location with a city, minus 10. And the whole idea is to create a hand of 7 cards that is worth the biggest amount of value. So you're trying to multiply these multipliers on top of each other as many times as you can to beef up the points in your hand. And the way you do this is you can draw from the hero deck or from the villain deck. And once you draw, you have to then place a card in the middle. And then subsequent players can draw from the hero deck, villain deck, or from the middle. And the game ends once there's 10 cards in the middle. So there comes a point where like maybe you're incentivized to try to keep adding cards to the middle if you think you have a really good hand, or just take cards from the middle if you think you have a really crappy hand and you just need the game to keep going. And at the end of the game, you have to have at least 1 hero and 1 villain in your hand. If you don't have one of those, your hand is worth 0. And so it's cool. Like you're kind of like toying around and you can kind of start to get a sense of what other people might be building. And we played it. And the first time I ever saw somebody break like 150 points, Jason just like came out of the gate, right? It was you that had the insane hand on the first one.
I mean, did I break the game? I don't know. I can't remember. Yeah, it was wild. It was, I want to say it was the second game that we played, but I got the Wakanda, like all the Wakanda tags. Yeah. And it just like compounded into, you broke this game, please put it away. Yeah.
But it's pretty snappy. Each game probably lasts like 10, 15 minutes tops.
Yeah, it is not a long game, but it's very satisfying.
Yeah, it's a really, really fun, quick card game. Kind of like not the same mechanics, but very similar to Flux, where it's like real quick and ready to go. So
yeah, it's small box, like super. It's one of the ones that sometimes I'll travel with and get stuck in an airport. Something that can kill some time.
So that was our Wednesday. Any other notes that anyone has from Wednesday that was like a highlight? I don't think so. I think that covers it. I think we staggered to our rooms, which the keys did work this year.
I do want to say one part of Wednesday that I really, really enjoyed was watching Jason completely analyze the setup of a Sheets, like to a scientific level that I've never experienced before.
It's I'm in retail. Sorry, can't shut it off. So awesome. So that was Wednesday. Moving into Thursday. This is really like Thursday was the day where we were all together. This was the day that no one had anything going on. We staked a claim in the board game room, and we played 3 main games. There was some other ones that were thrown in here or there, but Dice Throne, Marvel Dice Throne. We played that. We played a whole lot of Spearhead, and we played the newly purchased Halo board game. So before we go into depth into any of those mechanics, if our listeners are not familiar, what were each of your highlights for Thursday? I mean, Trace, did you got to roll some dice on a couple of things? Any highlights?
I've come to really enjoy Dice Throne quite a bit because it offers a unique experience pretty much every time that I've played it, depending on what character you're playing or whatever. So I think, Jason, you and I played one game solo with each other.
Yeah.
And then we ended up playing a 4-way game, which was something that I had not done yet. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I think Dice Throne, for those who haven't played it, it's basically Yahtzee with some skins on it and cards. You're just trying to hit certain combinations of numbers and symbols on your dice, and you can do different abilities, and you do damage to your opponent. It's kind of like a mixture between Magic the Gathering and Yahtzee. So, but it's a lot of fun. I don't actually think I played Spearhead that day. I think I just...
No,
I don't think so.
And then, but Danny and I played Unmatched with each other that day, which was
that's another one of my new favorites.
But I will let Danny go into depth on that one because I know that that's like his new
Yeah,
hobbies.
so Unmatched, Danny. This was one of the games out of the Play to Win out of the board game lounge, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So Unmatched is a really cool concept. It started off. It came out of Mondo, which does like a lot of art prints and stuff like that. So it's a very visually, in my opinion, very like visually stunning game. Like the art is really cool throughout the whole game. And they basically started off by being like, what are some non rights owned characters from books and history that we could use, and what would happen if they all fought each other? It's like the very first version of the game has like Wukong the Monkey King versus like Achilles versus, I don't know, like Bigfoot or something like that. And so it's like all these like random characters, and they all have, it's asymmetrical. They have different types of abilities and stuff. And they battle, and then the winner is the winner. But they've now since kind of added all these different expansions, and as the game's gotten popular, they've been able to help secure IP deals. So now, of course, they have Marvel stuff, which makes me very happy. But they also have Jurassic Park expansions. They're coming out with the Witcher expansions. They have a Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
There's a Ninja Turtle one coming.
As I say, the one that the four of us are all very excited about is a Ninja the Turtle like campaign. The Ninja Turtles campaign. And the way the game basically works is you have a little miniature and you have a little board, and the board has circles on it, and the circles are like one piece of movement, and the little miniature is your character. And so if you're playing as Little Red Riding Hood, you have a cool little Red Riding Hood miniature, and then some of the characters have sidekicks, and those are like little tokens that kind of look like coins. And then you have a deck of cards and a health wheel. In the deck of cards, you have 3 or 4 different types of cards. You have attack cards, defense cards. They do what you think they do. And versatile cards, which can be used in both attack and defense. And then I forget what the yellow ones are called, but they can be kind of things like draw extra cards or whatever, stuff like that. And then each character has a special ability that kind of makes them stand out and makes them a little different. And so the ones that we played in the board game room were like, it was Moon Knight, Luke Cage.
The one that you and I started with was Luke Cage, Moon Knight, and
Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider.
Yep. Ghost Rider. It's like Ghost Rider's thing was like he could move a little extra farther than other characters, and we went over enemies. He lit them on fire, which that makes sense. And then
you were
Luke Cage in that
game.
one.
Yeah.
And like Luke Cage, basically he like takes 2 less damage all the way down to 0, and so. Yep. He's super indestructible, which makes sense. And then they had another one that had Daredevil, Elektra, and Bullseye.
Yep.
That we played a lot of. I think we ended up playing much more of that box than the other one. And you can play it up to 4 players, and like they all kind of have their strengths. Like Bullseye was a murder turret because he can shoot from like 5 spaces away and just dome you. But then I figured out that if I trapped Trace in the corner, he couldn't escape all of my sweet little ninja attacks as Elektra. Yeah. Meanwhile, Jason was playing Daredevil, doing backflips on the side of the board, just messing both of us up. Because Daredevil's whole thing was like, you don't want to have any cards in your hand because you're blind. And then you got advantages from not having cards in your hand. And Jason was just like, yeah, I'll play everything.
Yes, play everything so then I can hit you real hard.
And meanwhile, I was like, here, hit all my little ninjas that only have 1 health. Like, please. So yeah, I love that game so then the theory of the game, which I haven't actually ever explored yet, is like you could take like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park versus Moon Knight versus Buffy the Vampire Slayer versus Bruce Lee, and have like this big battle royale. And that really kind of tickles my brain. I love that idea of like, because it's that stupid thing when you were kids and you would like be like, who would win in a fight, like Iron Man or Godzilla? It's like now I get to
settle it once and for all.
Yeah. And so if that's the kind of thing that makes you excited, I think you'd really like Unmatched. It is kind of it's not very expensive. Like a 4 character box is like $35-$40 or something like that. And then the ones that have rights are a little more expensive. So like I think like one of the Marvel ones is around that same price, but it only has 3 characters. But it's not an expensive buy-in. And you can buy ones that have just 2 characters for like $25. So it's a cheap. Check it out. Like I think the first one we ever bought in this house was the T-Rex versus Dr. Ellie Sattler from Jurassic Park. And then my wife and I were all in.
Yeah. And, spoiler alert, on Sunday, when they hand out these games, we were able to win the Hell's Kitchen Unmatched box. So, so that
Came
one
home.
came home and is in the collection. Jerod, I know you didn't get to play it on Thursday, but any comments on Unmatched? Was it fun? Did you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a ton of fun. I mean, it helps that, you guys let me win. So,
Yeah, we did.
that's a good way to hook somebody in a game. But just to speak, the fact that there were different mechanics, like, somebody might have a very huge health wheel. Electra has 2 health wheels because she dies and then she comes back as an undead hand ninja, which is I mean, it's cool that they baked those kind of mechanics in. It was a ton of fun. It's on the short list of things to pick up, I think, for my family in the near future, to be sure. Because, I think the idea of Little Red Riding Hood fighting Sasquatch or, whatever.
So, all right, that's Unmatched. But Jerod, did you have a top moment for Thursday, playing? Because you did play Spearhead on Trace.
Yeah, right. No, so I got to play Spearhead. Danny and I played, and then I got to play against my brother. And we gave our initial thoughts on Spearhead a few episodes ago, but I think I can just echo it's
pretty well designed.
It's very well designed, and it feels good. And you can still even though it's toned down, you can still do cool things like shoot your monster killer bow at a monster and but one shot it.
It does monster killer things.
Yeah. So the armies kind of feel like they're supposed to feel. But I mean, it plays well, and every game that I played was tight. It was never a blowout. I think the rubber band mechanics are built in fairly well. So yeah. So if you are AOS curious, I would recommend you go back and find our Spearhead episode and listen to that, and then check it out. It's
a really cool,
pretty cheap buy-in. You buy a box of minis, and you buy a rule book that comes with the board and terrain that you need, and that's everything that you need to play.
Yeah, I hadn't played any kind of army game in years, and it was really fun and exciting to get units on a table again, and I really enjoyed it, and I really was impressed with a lot of the way it worked, because one of the main reasons why I fell out of Underworlds was the deck building part of it is not something that I'm very good at or particularly enjoy. And when there was a deck of cards here, and it's I've seen what GW card games can be, and that's not really what I'm hoping for in my war game experience. And I was having flashbacks to those first, I forget what they were called, but those early 40K mission deck cards,
the Maelstrom
of Wars,
cards, where it'd be secure objective 1, then secure objective 6. It's they're on the opposite sides of the table, and I'm just merry-go-rounding around the table, just trying to ping objectives and not really do anything else. But this felt much more cohesive, and I liked that if you didn't want or couldn't really feasibly do that objective, it gave you
had
the power to do.
Use. Yep.
And so the only thing that I've had mild criticism of was my giant monster killer bow. It didn't provide me. And I had a unit of archers too, and there was no real thinking happening. You just kind of put them in the middle of the board, and the board's so small and the range is so big on those things. It's they're just going to shoot and then be charged eventually. But maybe a smarter person realizes that there's some cat and mousing that you can do. But I was but I'm just going to plunk this thing in the middle and just shoot the crap out of Jerod's giant monster, and then whatever happens after that, we're good.
Yep.
Yeah, and Jerod, you made a really good point of it, I think, on the car ride home about Spearhead in playing Justin. So you said something to the effect of typically when you play Justin, the full game, whether it's AOS or 40K, because Justin only plays every once in a while, or did only play once in a while, it was always kind of you had to break out rule books, and there was more rules figuring out than there was tactical gameplay. And Spearhead, because it is so easy to digest, you and him had some really good games that day.
Yeah, no, and that's true. When you're playing a big AOS game, you've got whatever your 9 different units on the table that you have to know all of the stats for. You got to roll out the mission, you got to set up the table, you got to place the objectives, and Spearhead distills all of that down, so it makes it easy. I mean, even for me, like I haven't played a big AOS game in forever either. But all I had to do was look at, like my 4 War Scroll cards for the 4 different units that I had on the tabletop, and like that's it. That's all I need to play. So everything that I'm working with is right there. The rules are distilled down, so you're not having to worry. Do I have command points? No, you don't have to worry about that. So Danny's a big fan.
Yep. Heck
Um,
yeah.
um, so you can just kind of play the game, and it makes it easy to get into, and it's fluid. You're not, as you said, you're not interrupted. Like, oh, how does this work? How does this interaction work? How does this play itself out? So you can get through, a game in probably 90 minutes easily. And then if both people know what they're doing, by the time you've got your War Scrolls memorized, I could see you getting through a game in, 70, 75 minutes without too much struggle. There probably won't be a lot of chit chat in that game, but if the goal is to get through the game, not to hang out with somebody, then I could see that happening.
Yeah, I think also like if you were really new to the whole thing, you could play Spearhead and like not do your like leadership ability and not pick like all of those things.
Yeah,
And just do what's on the cards.
Just play the box. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Justin played a lot that day too with a pretty new to tabletop gaming person, and it still seemed fun. Like that person was still making decisions. It wasn't like you're like, oh, do this because this is the best thing. They were still making decisions, and it definitely stood out. But Danny, did you have any other highlights from Thursday that we haven't talked about?
Nothing I can think of. It's just like I was going to play. So initially there was a moment where we didn't know if Jason was going to be able to make it or not. And I was under the impression for some reason, I thought Jerod and Trace both were booked on Thursday. And so when Jason was maybe not going to make it to Nova, I was like, well, crap, I don't want to just sit around staring at the wall all day by myself. So I had initially signed up to play AOS, having never played a minute of AOS. So I'm thankful that
it's a brave soul, sir.
Saving me from doing what I ended up doing, as you'll hear later, going into an event and being like, I've never played this. Please be kind.
So yeah, for Thursday for me, kind of like during the day highlight, my favorite game is Dice Throne. And that the reason that I pick out Dice Throne in this particular thing for Nova is we're sitting there and next thing you know, a local to our area, Matt, comes walking up like, hey, like, I saw Trace downstairs, like he sits down and starts playing Dice Throne. And that was kind of like, just to summarize Nova for me, like that is the best part, is where you get to hang out with people that you see. In this case, we see them locally. We see them like maybe every couple months, but to be there and play that game and have that experience was great. And that's why I love Nova. And so many people came through on Thursday during the day to say hi or sit down and chat and just catch up with life. So Thursday was a huge kind of refreshing moment for me. Dice Throne being the most. I love Marvel. I love playing Black Widow. I love Doctor Strange mechanics, all that stuff. It's great. But then we also played a new game in Halo, and it was one of the first times that you were able to purchase Halo. We did a demo of it downstairs at Nova. I decided to pick up the box. It's actually what's holding my mic up right now for you all to hear me. But it was
great person.
Great person. But the game is fun, and there is no other way to describe it other than it plays like a game of Halo on the tabletop. And what really sold me is there is no measuring. It is on squares, and it has terrain, which is kind of like cardboard, really well done cardboard terrain, and it has all the miniatures in the box. Jerod and I did set it up, and at one point I'm like, holy cow, this game is going to take us 17 hours.
Yes.
Because it kind of just dragged out. And then that's when we realized, like, we're not playing a tabletop tactical shooter game. We are playing Halo. Like, run at each other, punch each other in the face, and then shoot them once their shields are down. And then it picked up a lot. And then we learned more rules. And when I got to play it again and again, you pick up weapons from the map. You respawn. There's a whole bunch of tactics in there. It does have exploding dice, which I am a huge fan of. Nothing
Infinitely exploding dice.
Yes, infinity.
Yeah.
You keep rolling those 8s, like just keep rolling them, and they keep exploding, and you keep hitting. They're called headshots, actually, in the game. But a lot of fun once we got it all worked out. Really, really enjoyed that and played it a couple times during the week. But then, as the day kind of wound down, and we were waiting for the What the Hex crew to show up, we decided to go to dinner.
We did decide to go to dinner,
We
and
did.
it was raining.
And it was raining. Like, it had just started raining.
Nothing
Yeah.
bad happens when it
Like
rains.
while we were
Not a
walking.
thing.
Yeah, while we were walking. Yep. Yeah. So I guess I get to tell this part of the story.
I
This
mean,
is
I
all you,
certainly
bud.
can't.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Danny might. So we're walking, and we're in a city, right? There's drains and grates and things everywhere, and we're walking down the sidewalk, and then the next thing I know, my brother Justin is like down on the ground, like has clearly slipped. From my perspective, it looks like he has just like slipped on a grate, landed on his keister, and he's not a small fella, so like landing on your keister when you're over 40 is not good news, period. But when you're a bigger fella, it's even worse news. And so he's like laying on the ground, taking a minute, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I think somewhat simultaneously we all see his leg, and so I'm not gonna like super embarrass him. Like we don't, but like whatever angle he fell at, like it ripped his leg below his knee open. So we're like literally on the same block as a Walgreens. So like I'm going to get bandages. I come back up, and I gotta give Trace. I gotta give you props here, man. You're like healthcare training. Like it just flipped on. Like you were doing exactly what I see. Like what I've seen EMTs and first responders and lifeguards, like all of these like frontline healthcare workers, ER nurses, where somebody has clearly experienced physical trauma, that you just engage them and you keep them engaged on anything but the trauma that they're experiencing in that moment. So like you're asking my brother about anything and everything, like in a cool, calm, professional manner. You're asking about his truck, like, and I'm sure you're interested in his truck, but like the goal is to keep him like active and engaged in something completely different. So
That's right.
I know that I hope that I thanked you that weekend, but I'll thank you here live.
Yeah,
and,
you did.
And I know he appreciated it. But so, I do my, Boy Scout lifeguard first aid, get him bandaged up. Danny's over in the corner dry heaving because
of blood.
It is not pretty. It is not pretty.
I genuinely felt bad. I apologize to everybody. I was like, I wasn't like, because we had a few sodas throughout the course of that day.
Some sodas and coffees.
And so I was not like my normal self, and I didn't want people to think that I was just like, screw this, I'm leaving. But I was like, no, I'm feeling sick looking at this. I've got to move. I got to walk away, get some air.
No, but so this was at like 8:15 probably.
About 8.
Well, it was a little before 8 because we discovered that all of the urgent cares were closing at 8.
Yeah,
so
8:00, almost on the dot.
Yeah. So I call a lift. We get my brother to.
Well, originally you were like, I'm gonna go get the car, and I was like, don't do that because we're gonna lose our parking space. So
and lift. Well, and we had some coffees.
That's correct. Yeah. Yes.
Justin will rot before we lose that parking spot.
Yeah, fair. But we end up at where did you send me, Trace? I don't even Howard. You sent me to Howard. Right?
Howard. Yep.
Yeah. So we end up.
They had the
Howard
slightly better reviews
than George Washington.
And I was also thinking Howard's probably a smaller university, a smaller ED that's not a level 1 trauma center. So I was trying to think about all these things that,
this is where your professional training comes in. So we end up at Howard University Emergency Department. And by the time it was all said and done, we were only there for 3 hours, and it probably could have been less. About an hour of that was us getting handed off from triage to imaging. Did not go under protocol. So basically my brother did not exist in the system for about 45 minutes. But anyway, we get him taken care of. He gets stitched up. We get back. His whole lower leg is wrapped in bandages. And yeah, so, high and a low. I got to take my brother to the emergency department, but so that's the low. But the high was that, like, all things considered, to only spend 3 hours in an emergency department, after 9 o'clock at night is it's pretty good.
So my favorite part of this story is not that Jerod had to take his brother to the ER or that Danny could not even look to his right. We're on the street and like we obviously have it handled, right? Like it is a traumatic situation and it's a deep cut. Like it is what it is. But this gentleman passing by, and I hope you're listening to this.
You're a con attendee.
Right? Stops, looks at it. Like, oh, he fell? Yeah, he fell.
I'm a doctor.
You want me to take a look at it? I'm a doctor. Yep. You know what? That needs stitches. And walks away. Thank you, doctor. We had established this for my non-trained eye that we need stitches.
I didn't even know that happened. That's amazing.
Yeah,
we didn't tell you that?
No.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh yeah.
I'm a doctor. It needs stitches.
Well, the best part, I don't know if you noticed, Jay, but that part is like he had walked by going up the hill and then turned around and came back to do that.
It was a perfect Dr. Pepper commercial where he was like, "Trust me, I'm a doctor" type deal.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I stayed in a Holiday Inn Express last night.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's,
right.
Yes, definitely Holiday Express vibes.
That's beautiful.
So while Jerod had to go deal with that, we went, and that was the night we got pizza, right? Yeah, we got
giant
pizza
slices.
because Trace bought a huge pizza for when Justin and Jerod got back. We get back to the board game room, and What the Heck's crew shows up. So got to meet all of them and stay there for a couple hours chit chatting. And then Danny learned how to play Blood Bowl.
Did I? I had a very beloved on this channel, a guest star on many an episode, the one and only Jerod, who had also had a few sodas and coffees, I think, at that point, trying to teach me Blood Bowl in his phenomenal accent and like aggressive hand talking, but skipping over so many rules throughout the process.
And Jimmy just gently shepherding him back to certain things that you need
Jimmy,
to know.
My favorite part of that whole experience was Jerod being like, "Okay, so you're going to do a pow and you're going to run and you do," and he's like explaining this thing that was like trying to figure out running before crawling, and he rolls the dice. He's like, "Oh, that's not good." And I'm looking at these symbols. They're like Greek to me. They mean nothing. And I remember Jimmy just being like, "Well, Jerod,
just tell him what the face of the dice.
Why don't we explain what the dice mean first?" And this was great. Like half an hour into my tutorial on Blood Bowl.
It was great
at like 11 o'clock at night.
That was like my favorite fly on the wall experience over the week. Was just like watching that whole thing happen. It was excellent.
None of us were in any state. Like I think Jimmy had been there he landed shortly before that, and he was like pretty travel wary. And Jerod was doing his thing, and I had been out and about too. And so it was probably not the smartest idea we had, but it was fun.
But you had to learn because Friday you had to get up and play in the Blood Bowl event.
I did. Cool. So that was another one of those things where like Jerod said, life got kind of busy, and Jimmy and I played an awful game of like cat and mouse where we were not connecting whatsoever on our schedules. We were supposed to play Blood Bowl a few different times, so that my first lesson wasn't the night before at Nova. But it just never came to be. A lot of it was my fault for weird schedule stuff, but 'tis what it is. And so then I went and did the Blood Bowl beginners sevens on Friday at like 9 a.m. And it was a lot of fun. It was Jimmy and Jerod also did it, and it was kind of like Jerrod's thing. He wanted us to play it. He was very excited. He loves it. He plays in Spain and all that stuff. And it was a really interesting experience because I've always loved the idea of Blood Bowl, but I've never really played it. I played it once before that, back when they first re-released it back in like 2016 16 or whatever that was.
Yeah, I don't even think sevens were a thing then.
No, it was full
Yeah.
Blood Bowl, and I went to a thing at Atomic, and they basically did like a learn to play thing, and so I didn't even really like play a game, right? It was kind of like they held my hand through it. And so I was like, yeah, screw it. I'll do this event. That sounds fun. I'll get to paint up a little team of orky football players to look like the Steelers. It'll be awesome. My initial idea was I was going to like number them all as the worst Steelers players that I could think of in my life. And like, I was going to just make it a thing. But then I didn't finish them. So that didn't happen. But the event was fun. And it was my first time ever really playing a game that had, like, from my understanding of it, Blood Bowl has not really changed very much since it was created in like, what was it, the late 80s, early 90s, or whatever it was when Blood Bowl first came around. And it's more or less, excuse me, the same game. And so there's a lot of kind of like the people that play that game know it, like front to back, every single thing. And there's a lot of kind of like prescribed ways to play where it's very clear, like, oh, if you have this character, you do this thing and it works. And if you have that character and you do this thing, it works. And if you do anything else, it doesn't work. And the game is very punishing, right? Like once you fail, like if your first player fails, like your turn is over. Yeah. Trace just did the Jerod hands because that was the thing while he was teaching me. So like when you fail, it's over your whole turn. So you want to kind of save your riskiest moves to the end of your turn. That way you just do your sure things that don't cause any risk. And, but anyway, it was an interesting experience because like the first person I played against, he was super nice. And I came to the table and I was like, hey, this is, like technically my second ever game of Blood Bowl. Cause silly me, I came to this event called the Beginners Bash Sevens Rumble or whatever it's called. I thought it was going to be kind of a beginner event. And he kind of looked at me and took a breath and was like, oh, well, I'm a bit of a tryhard. And I was like, all right, that's fine, man. Like, rock and roll. Like I'm just telling you because like I'm not going to know every little rule, and if I do something stupid or if I make a mistake, like please feel free to call me on it, whatever. And he was like, yeah, I'm sorry, I just like I really like to play like hard. So I was like, that's fine, man. Like we all pay our money. Like you get to experience this on your own terms. Whatever's fun to you. And he's like, well, winning is fun. I was like, okay, all right, here we go. And he was genuinely really helpful throughout the whole event. There was one point late in the game where he was already winning by quite a bit, and there was no chance of me coming back. And you can do a move called a blitz once a turn, and you have to declare the blitz before you move the character. And at this point, I had moved every one of my characters except for one, and I had not done the blitz. So it's pretty freaking obvious what I'm going to do next, right? I'm gonna blitz. I picked up my little guy, moved him one square. He could move 6. I moved him 1, and I said, oh, sorry, by the way, this is a blitz. After telling him this is my first real Blood Bowl game. And I watched him struggle so hard. Like he wanted so badly to be like, actually, you didn't say it was a blitz, so your turn's over. And I like looked at him and I could watch it, like the gears. And I just kind of gave him a like, come on, man. Like, come on. And he was like, okay, yeah, like I don't mind. Of course, I don't mind, but somebody might. So you should know. And it was like, whatever, dude. Just let me play the game. And so he was a trip, but everybody else was really nice. I played a little kid. He was lovely. A little boy. He was like 9 years old. And when I told him I had never played Blood Bowl before, he had the best reaction. He taught me Blood Bowl in a more systematic way than Jerod did. That little boy, when I told him, oh, this is only my second game of Blood Bowl, he pursed his hands together and went, oh, okay. 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 All right. So, and he picked up the dice and he said, so these are the dice. At which point I was like, no, his name was Arlo. I was like, oh, Arlo, I know the dice. I just mean like, maybe some of these rules things I might screw up. And he's like, oh, okay. So he actually started with the dice, but I ended up not winning a single game of Blood Bowl. Drew against the 9-year-old, lost against everybody else. But it was fun. And the last guy I played had a really fun Buffalo Bills themed team that had all very like punny, cornate names that were Bills players' names that I immediately sent to Jason because I was like, you need to see this. This is awesome.
Yes, they were very cool names. And except Josh Allen was Josh Allen.
Josh Allen. He wasn't like Smosh Allen. He was Josh Allen.
Well, good. So Friday, Trace, anything stick out for you on Friday? Like highlight?
So Friday, Jerod and I played a game of Spearhead. It was a very, very tight game of Spearhead. There was lots of absolute carnage early in the game.
Yes.
He charged across the field and promptly destroyed my chariot before it even moved. And then it was a very good game. And then I kind of returned in kind and got his big monster down to like 1 wound early in the game as well. So we both lost large pieces early, and then it was just a grind for the rest of the game to try and kill things that get to either come back or get debuffed or whatever. So it was good, but at the end of the game, like it was this odd moment, and I've been working on just as a player trying to play with my opponent and not against my opponent. So like I know that there was a couple times that like Jerod was doing something that I was like, tactically you might want to do this instead. And like we just had like nice dialogues throughout the game. But then towards the end I was like, I'm not going to win this game. And just kept playing through, and like it ended up being 1 point difference between Jared's score and my score. But it was an excellent game. And Jerod, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that particular game, but I enjoyed it. It was definitely competitive, but in a good way.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, I think it's hard just because we've played against each other so often.
Yeah,
for us to not like, even if we
get a little brotherly.
game,
we get a little brotherly with it.
We do get a little brotherly. I think it just like ramps. And so, to your point on it ending up closer, I think, than it looked on the table. At the end of turn 3, the score was 12-8 in my favor. So I'm up 4, which is a pretty big differential.
Yeah.
But I was only able to score 4 points in turn 4, and you scored 7.
Mm-hmm.
So to bring it to a 16-15 close in my favor. So the fact that like there are opportunities in that game for somebody to score 7 points in a round to rubber band as needed. I think it just speaks. I think it's a well-designed game, and it's a lot of fun. And I think that there is depth for people that want to play it like at a very tactically deep level. And there's a decision tree information in there. I think eventually what's going to shake out is there's going to be the best, heroic trait and the best.
I'm sure that already exists.
Or whatever.
I'm sure that already exists.
Like some optimal option, but
I think the cool thing about that was like if a die roll had gone a little bit different.
Yep,
we would either tied or I would have won. So like, and that to me shows it's a really well designed game. It's but I really enjoyed that. And then I spent a lot of time just kind of like wandering on Friday too. I would come back and there would be like everybody would be involved in games. I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm just gonna go walk a little more. So I enjoyed that. Picked up like gifts and stuff for people, for James and my wife. I always get little fun things. And Danny, after seeing your pen, I totally wouldn't have bought one of those and gave it to Jenny, which she thought it was hilarious, by the way.
Awesome.
So there was a little like pin that you can put on, fabric or whatever. And it was a Space Marine laying on its side.
A gray Space Marine.
It was a gray Space Marine. And he was laying on his side, and it says, "Paint me like one of your miniatures," like the Kate Blanchett scene from Titanic.
Kate Winslet.
Kate Winslet. Sorry, not Kate Blanchett.
How dare!
I know. Damn. But Jenny says that to me all the time. Like, draw me like one of your French girls, and so I brought that pin home to her, and she thought that it was absolutely hilarious. So that was a excellent find from you that I then carried on to my wife. And then I got James a little Griffhound and a pack of Seraphon cards because he has shown interest in playing Age of Sigmar. So I'm looking forward to getting the Spearhead of the Seraphon for him so he and I can play. So I bought the Seraphon cards for him, and he was elated when he opened them. So that's what I did most of that day, was just kind of peruse the shops. I bought some dice, which I then was not able to use the next day, which was awesome. But I'll get to that whenever we get to my set.
Didn't you have to do a repair?
Yeah, a little triage. Well, that was
I did have to do that. I was trying to put that out of my mind, but since you guys brought that up,
one of the lows of Wednesday.
So Arrival on Wednesday had a black spot upon it when the lovely gentleman who helped us bring our baggage up laid my tableware case on its side, and the only model that I did not have very well magnetized in my case, because I didn't think anybody was going to turn it on its side, was my Bloodthirster. And my Bloodthirster, when we got it into the hotel room, had some broken stuff on it, including his flail, which is not an easy part to repair. It is a tiny connection point. So I got to use the Hobby Haven on Friday, and it was awesome. And this is props to Army Painter and also to Nova for having this there. They just have these free tools that you can come and use. So I bought like a little packet of drill bits from one of the shops down in the Manor Hall that I needed for a specific size. And then I went up to the front desk and asked for a staple. So I said, can you please just staple 2 pieces of paper for me? I just need it for a event. And I just really wanted the staple, but there's no easy way for you to say, hey, can I have a staple? So I said, can I have 2 pieces of paper stapled together? I know it's a very odd request. And the lady at front desk was, absolutely, sir. Stapled it and handed it to me. And then I promptly pulled the staple out, cut it, and pinned the Bloodthirster. I also had to pin a couple of Furies because they were casualties from where the Bloodthirster fell on them because they're super fragile models. So I had to pin some ankles. And then just because I needed to do some paint touch-ups too, I had the paint there from the Hobby Haven. So it was a great little opportunity to use that space. Yeah, so that was something else I had to do. That was my early morning event before Jerod and I played our game of Spearhead. Yep, that was
nice.
Jerod, what about you? Your highlight for
play? Yeah. So our game of Spearhead actually got interrupted because I went to go do a 1 hour speed painting competition with my brother and his partner Ashton. So so that was fun. So I grabbed a little Fennec Fox monk. And painted that up with the Army Painter speed paints. And I will say that Speed Paint 2.0 formula is better than Speed Paint 1.0 because the Speed Paint 2.0 doesn't reactivate all of the other paints on the models. So kudos to Army Painter for that. And then I think it took me about 40 minutes to realize that one of the other paints you could mix into the speed paints and turn them into what felt like a normal acrylic paint. And I wish that I had discovered that like 15 minutes into the session, because then I could have spent 45 minutes painting in my traditional style instead of trying to make the speed paint work. But it was a lot of fun, and I got to sit next to my brother and Ashton, and there were I think like 8 or 9 of us total doing it. And of course, me, my super introverted self, I didn't speak to anybody else the entire time that I was painting. I definitely wasn't heckling anyone or giving anybody grief or
clearly not
commenting out loud on conversations that we're having at another table. Definitely did not do any of those things to try to drum up engagement and excitement in the event. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And now I have this cool little Fennec Fox that I painted up that is going to live on my shelf, and I can say, hey, I painted that in an hour. So that was a lot of fun. And then there was a lot of
board games being played.
There were a lot of board games playing.
Involved,
and this is when the crew from Madison, Wisconsin, out of the What the Heck's podcast. So Skylar and Davey and Phil's son Emmett were all there in force. And playing lots of board games. There was a bigger board game that was being played at one point, and was Friday the night that we played. Nope.
Friday was not, but Arcs was being played. That was the game.
Arcs was being played.
So
you guys play the Haunted Mansion game that day?
That was Saturday. I think.
No, this is Friday.
Friday.
Oh, that was Friday. Okay.
Yeah. So you get back, and they were playing Arcs, which I was observing, and that was a lot of rules, but very, very cool. And it's always great to see a large game like that played. Davey was kind of the moderator and walking people through it. His son Emmett was killing it, knew a bunch of rules, and but to see kind of this long, epic battle on a traditional like 3X style board game was a lot of fun. But then when you got back, you played Betrayal.
Betrayal at House on the Hill. Yeah. So this is, for anybody that isn't familiar, wow, I use that phrase a lot, huh?
Yeah.
So Betrayal at the House on the Hill is if you took the Scooby-Doo gang and made a board game out of it, essentially. Except the biggest caveat is that one of the Scooby-Doo gang is the bad guy, not Old Man Jenkins. But the idea is you have all of these characters. You have to explore this house. You don't know why you're exploring the house. You're just exploring it. That's what you do. Eventually, you find some haunted items. The haunt occurs, and now one of the players is now the antagonist, and the rest of the players are the heroes in the story. And in this case, we ran across these man-eating plants. And this goes back to like when I originally played Betrayal at House on the Hill. There's a character in the game called Oxbellows. And Oxbellows is not very bright, and he is not very wise, as they will say, but he is fast and he is strong, and he's really good at punching plants. And so that's what he did for most of the game.
Yeah. And
some plants.
I joined late, and I get the little boy that's good at nothing. And Davey's across from us. He's playing the little girl. And we're like walking upstairs, and then Davey just runs away. He just runs the opposite way, leaves me to be clinging on to a chasm on the second level. Davey, I have not recovered, but then you died. So that's what you get. So, but
it became plant food.
It's not the worst thing he did that weekend.
It was not. But the other part of this game too is Emmett becomes the haunted person, right?
Yeah.
So you just start talking trash to a 10-year-old. Like, I'm gonna punch your plant in the face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
that was about the moment that I came back for. And I was like, what is happening right now?
I came up and I had finished Bloodbowl, and you guys were just... So I played that game twice, and as I said to Trace, I was like, every time I play this, like, it's really fun until this point, because it always devolves into a point where, like, nobody's doing anything. We're just taking turns rolling dice. Like, we're just going.
I punched the plant. The number of times that I heard, I punched the plant. I punched the plant.
I'll stab this guy. I'll punch the plant. I'll punch the plant. I'll punch the plant. I'll stab this guy. I'll punch the plant. I'll punch the plant. That was like the game rotation for about half an hour.
That's fair, but you gotta hype it up.
Yeah, you guys were having a great time.
Y'all were having a great time.
Not knocking that.
I was just very confused about what was happening. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go take another lap. I'll be back.
It was probably the loudest game in the lounge. It was hilarious. It was a ton of fun. So that was kind of like the morning or pre dinner kind of shift in the board game lounge. For me, I got to play with Skylar, Phil, and Wellner, another person from the Madison crew. We played Dice Throne. So Skylar was Spider-Man, Wellner was Black Widow. I had the pleasure of playing Scarlet Witch, and Phil had Doctor Strange. And I know we touched on Dice Throne a little bit from the previous day, but each character plays so differently, even though it's kind of like this Yahtzee based with cards. And it just is so much fun. Like Scarlet Witch can kind of shut off your dice, like literally give you one of her dice to roll with one of your attacks. So poor Wellner, I kept picking on him because he was always in the lead. And the way that we played this 4-person game was not on teams. So we kind of played King of the Hill. So who was ever winning had the most health points. You got a benefit of drawing a card if you tacked them. So it made sure that it kind of no one was getting ganged up on. So poor Wellner had to roll a Scarlet Witch dice. And for anyone that's not familiar, the dice are bespoke, right? To
Yep,
the right word. Got it. Yep.
That's right.
To the character. So if you're rolling a Scarlet Witch die, you're only going to look for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All the symbols, they don't give you anything. And then we had Skylar on the other side that was just web slinging everywhere, Spider-Man, like just boom, boom, and then slamming and combo attacking into people, just taking everyone out. Phil's over here with Doctor Strange, just casting spells and trying to get some stuff. And Strange is a very difficult character to play, and for his first playthrough, Phil, you did a great job. And then Wellner's trying to get upgrades and just go Black Widow on everyone, give them time bombs. And yeah, it was just a ton of fun. I really, really like the game. The characters really do feel like individual characters. And then we already talked about Betrayal. So fast forward, we end that day. We go out to dinner or do whatever we do for dinner. I don't even remember that night what happened for the dinner.
I think everybody did their own thing. I think I went for a walk and got like a sandwich that night or something.
I tried to coordinate with Oscar Lars to go to dinner that night, and we just kept missing each other, and so I just ended up back across the pond for that evening. And then I came back.
I think I had chicken fingers.
I probably had pizza, hotel pizza.
Yeah, I think that's the way it went down, because Jerod and I had a very important event to get to on Friday night. It's kind of a Nova tradition.
Was it watch Danny read the rules for Hunt for the One Ring?
Yes, that's what it was. No, it was Liar's Dice. So we sat down for Liar's Dice this year, Jerod, kind of a tradition that is at Nova, and got to play with Carl from the Independent Characters, Kat and Caleb, and yet again another great, and Carl's wife, which she was fantastic, by the way. And we got to play Liar's Dice for many, many hours, giving money to charity, the Table Word charity, supporting that. And it was loud. It was boisterous. We had a lot of fun. We kept buying dice. People kept coming and going. Bunch of the GW crew came up and played. A bunch of the Nova crew came over and played. But in the end, were you the best liar?
No, I was not.
Either was I. I was saved multiple times by our friends around the table giving me dice. And I thank you for keeping us in the game. Might not have been the biggest game of Liar's Dice that we've ever played at Nova. Typically, it's multiple tables. This time it was just 2 tables. But we did raise the most money for charity. So we'll walk out on that one.
I wonder how that happens.
I don't know.
It couldn't possibly be when Jerod started the game by offering like $20 to switch seats with someone.
No, couldn't have been that.
Didn't start the frivolous spending early at all.
It's not frivolous spending. It's donating to charity.
Yeah, frivolous donations.
There we go.
It's lying and manipulating the game with our wallets. That's what it is.
That's a pay to win, baby. And we still didn't win.
Still didn't win, but we had fun along the way. And then while that was going on, Jimmy and Jerod showed up again. And this is the night where I wish I would have walked away from Liar's Dice a little bit. Like this would be my down point of Nova. This is really down. But I wish I would have walked away from Liar's Dice because you played Quacks, Danny.
Oh,
it's
Quacks
one of my favorite games.
Amazing time playing Quacks.
I was so happy when I saw that on the board game shelf because Jimmy came back and was like, "Hey, why don't you pick out a board game?" And I was like, "All right, crap, I don't know what's over there." And when I saw that little box, I was like, "Oh, well, I know what this night calls for."
Yeah,
it's awesome.
So you, Trace, Jimmy, and Jerod played Quacks. There was a lot of laughter coming from that table. And then the other thing that we missed out was night 1 of the What the Hex crew running the
Blood on the
Clocktower. So because of Liar's Dice, we missed night 1, and I'm still not over it at all.
It's okay. We'll get there.
So anything else from Friday? Anyone?
That's it, man.
Okay.
Well, I got one. I think it's actually from before Friday, but it's on the theme of Dice Throne. Was a great moment when I played in the 4-player game and I was playing as Carol, as Captain Marvel, and I had rolled like a mediocre roll that Jason didn't want me to have, and so he played his card to like re-roll all of your dice, and so I re-rolled into 3 out of 6 being like my big dice, and I was like, oh, you screwed up, Jason. And I like played 2 cards, like matched the dice, and I had rolled the full Yahtzee. And then Jason was like, oh, and then went to go flip me and make me not do it. And then I pouted and was like, I've never done a Yahtzee. Let me do the Yahtzee. And so Jason let me do the Yahtzee.
I did.
And then he ended up winning the whole thing.
The dice gods repaid me because I rolled a natural Yahtzee.
Yeah, like not too long after
game.
that.
Yeah. So,
but it was just so funny because like it was like one of those things where Jason thought he was being real slick, like taking me out of my game, and then I felt like I was real slick because I was about to like dominate the game, and then Jason was going to completely undercut me, but was very nice about it.
Yeah. So, and then this is Friday also too was the night that I have a lot of shame because of Friday. So I pride myself when we go to Nova is I can't stop. I won't stop. I will play games till I drop. And I might have had too much coffee that morning because when everyone was ready to pack it in after Quacks of Quedlinburg, I went to bed too. And then Skylar texted me about 20 minutes after I had laid down into bed, and I failed him. So Skylar, I am sorry that I was not available to play until 2:00 in the morning on Friday. But Saturday was a new day. We get up, and this is where the real events start for y'all. So Trace, like, what happened on Saturday?
I played in my first Old World tournament. I had played a grand total of 2 very small games prior to this event. So I was feeling pretty green. But luckily, my first opponent was also pretty green, and we just kind of played, looked up rules as we needed to, called the TO over as we needed to. Played my Chaos Demons list. It was a little bit of a mixed bag. It had some majority Khorne themed demons with some Flushhounds and Blood Crushers and some Furies that were marked Khorne, a Bloodthirster, and then a couple Tzeentch elements because demons play best when they actually have a little bit of mixed deities in there. So used the Demon Prince and some Flamers for buffs, and a little bit of shooting just to kind of help support. And my first game was into a Chaos Dwarf player, and he definitely was trying to feel his way through the rules as well. I kept trying to, like I said earlier, play with my opponent and, trying to help him make some more tactical decisions. I was able to rely on a lot of previous editions experience, even though the rule set was still pretty new. But there were certain moments in the game where I would say, hey, like, this is your command phase. You have some spells you want to cast. And he was like, no, I'm good. And I was like, probably need to look at your spells just to make sure that you don't have anything that you don't want, like you buff spells or debuff spells or whatever. He's like, no, okay, I'm good. That's all right. And it got kind of to the point which Danny will kind of relate to in his conversation about his Saturday. But it got to a certain point where we had gone through 2 turns and we were over halfway through our round. And I was like, okay, I need to actually score some points here in order for me to actually win. So I kind of really pushed hard and ended up winning that game pretty handily, which vaulted me into another game. Well, it was not out of control. It was like a 13 to like 7 game or something like that. Which got my first win of the day. And then my next game was into a Beastman player. And his list was really well done. It was like a very snow-themed Beastmen list with some cool like ice yetis and stuff like that that represented his razor gores. Had a big block of Bestigor and a big block of Gore that were kind of the center of his army. A bunch of Gorgons that had all the bad things I didn't want to deal with. But that game pivoted around one series of events, which I charged a bunch of things into his big brick of Gore, and he had a rerollable 10 leadership break test that he needed to pass. He rolled an 11, and then he rolled a 12. And then proceeded to roll a 2 on his flee because he straight up failed his leadership and fled instead of falling back in good order, which meant that I could catch him, which I did. And then I just daisy chained through the rest of his army. And that game was over really, really. That was a quick game. And that's just kind of how Warhammer goes sometimes. So those were 2 wins. And then my last game of that day was into a Bretonnians player who was very well experienced, because at this point I am 2-0 and I am now playing on table 1 against a very good Bretonnian player. His name was Peter. And we had an awesome game. It was a interesting deployment where some of the flanks were pushed up on one side of the board and some of the flanks were receded on the other side. So it was kind of a weird, like, puzzle piece deployment. So I set my stuff up very hard on one flank and he did the same. And so it was this like toilet bowl situation where we just like swirled with each other. So we just kind of maneuvered. I crashed his flank. He tried to crash my flank, but I was moving my flank back as far as I could to try and minimize casualties. But it was an awesome game. The score did not really denote how good of a game it was. That particular game, I can identify, I think, the major turning point where it happened, and it was actually right at the beginning of the game, because I had my Demon Prince allowed me to have 5 spells. There's only 6 available in the lore that I use for him. And so as kind of like a fun little mini game at the beginning of the game, I will always like offer up my spell cards to my opponent and say, hey, pick one of these. I don't get that for the game. And the rest I get to keep. He picks the only buff spell that I had that I really wanted. And so I didn't have that additional like throughput for the whole game. And I really feel like that was a large portion of why the game went the way it did. But he was awesome. That was a great like wrap up for my night, even though I did lose my first game. To give him that good of a game and only have just a couple games under my belt made me feel really good about my list and my decision making and stuff like that. But dice gonna dice, and turns out Pegasus Knights are really, really good. So, but yeah, it was an excellent first day of the old world. And that took the entire day. It was a 10 o'clock to 8:30 p.m. marathon that day. So we'll get to the next part, which you guys are going to talk about, and I'll chime in when we get to that. But that was how my day went.
So then that Saturday was the MCP tournament, and Danny, Jerod, and myself were signed up to play that MCP tournament. I just want to give everyone an opportunity to do their best at MCP. So I decided to not play, and really is I had made all these new friends. Like the whole Madison crew came in, and I wanted to play awesome board games with them, and we were set, ready to go. So that day for me, I met Skylar, Phil, Wellner, and Zach downstairs, and we played Scythe. I believe that's Scythe, yep. Which is like a I don't know, like Risk game, kind of like Risk, but 10 times bigger than that. And Skylar did a great job explaining it. He said that you're going to see the board and it's going to look like this combat game, and it's not. Like, don't try to win. But Jason, your faction is really good at fighting. So mistakes were made in the beginning of the game. And by the end of the game, I had beefed up my army, but I probably should have went quicker. So like for this faction to kind of get going, I should have attacked right away. I didn't. But then there was someone that will remain nameless at the table trying to make political deals saying, don't attack me, don't do this. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not the game. And I'm playing basically as Germany. So I tried to just take over their entire territory, not really to getting victory points, but to just keep them locked into their capital. Unfortunately, the person I selected to apply this strategy to, the movement for their faction just didn't care. Like they just moved out to another faction and went through. And it's a great game. Like it is very like economy based. Like set up your economy, kind of get your card going and like get your build order, and then it just kind of feeds in to win. And Phil ended by taking that. But again, thank you, Skylar, for walking us through that game, teaching us how to play. I'm sorry that I sucked and could not do you more proud in taking out all those other players. Zach also played too, and he did very well. So it was great. It was a lot of fun. And then at that point, I think it was like around lunch or whatever, maybe a little bit afternoon, Davey came back with Emmett and a friend that Davey had from Washington, D.C., and his son, and we played a game called Vast, the Mysterious Manor. And this was a ton of fun. It is an asymmetrical game where all 5 characters are trying to do a different objective, but like those objectives, while you're completing them, stop the other person from completing their objective. And I think the coolest part about this game is a person plays the house or the board that you're actually in. And that was Emmett, and he was messing us up, and the house was eating stuff and putting out poltergeists, and my skeletons were running out the outside of the house trying to get this paladin, and then Davey's like casting all these spells trying to take life force from everybody, and then there's a spider that is a big spider, and then it's a little spider, and then it's big spider, and then it runs around and long story short, that damn spider got out of the house and they won the game. I don't know how it happened. We had them in a good position, but it was super fun, lots of laughs, a great new experience for me. And while we were doing that, the other part of the crew was playing Unmatched in the board game lounge. But now I'm really excited because I gave you this opportunity to play MCP. Jerod, how did that go? Like, how did you guys do in the tournament without me?
Probably worse than I would have done with you. I don't know. No, so I mean, it was fun. I had a good time. I'm not an MCP pro. I'm not gonna like run through everything. We did have sweet shirts.
We did. They were incredible.
Roosevelt's. So also not sponsored by them, but they make great shirts.
But
so
give a
check them
call,
out.
if you want.
Yeah. I should. But yeah, so like I'm wearing my X-Men 97 shirt, and Danny's got on a like classic, like all the Marvel Heroes shirts, and we show up, and the reason that we're signed up for this tournament instead of any other event at MCP is because we get the actual AMG official event support. So we're getting the cool like event dice, and we get the holographic Infinity Stone cards and all this stuff. And every round they do a door prize. So like just for showing up, they pull a name at random, and you can get like more AMG specific swag. And they do lemonade raffles. So every time you lose a game, you put a ticket in the box, and if your name gets drawn, you get other cool stuff. But anyway, so as far as the tournament's concerned, I brought X-Force, and it was a pure X-Force roster, like zero splash at all. There are 10 X-Force characters in the affiliation list, and that's what I brought. And so my first game, my dice were a little bit unreasonable in my favor. Colossus, for anybody that plays MCP, is not supposed to be a beater. He's supposed to stand on something and keep you from capping it and just not die. But he like one-shots Mystique in one round. And so like the game just went in my favor pretty early. So I won round one.
Tell us about how you met your opponent.
Oh my gosh. You're going to make me do this.
Yeah, this is the funniest part because it's not you at all. Like that's the best.
It is not me at all. So, all right. So we're in there early, whatever. And, as I alluded to before, I'm super introverted. I do not listen to other people's conversations. I don't chime in to conversations that are people having people in rooms. Sarcasm, I don't know how well it comes across the radio.
That is
the complete
Polar
opposite of me.
of Jerod.
Yes, I'm very extroverted. I love engaging in crowds. I love engaging with people. So we're sitting there, whatever. Danny, I think you may have even
I think I went to the
not.
bathroom. Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't even in the room at the time, and so one of the MCP players is talking about their standings. I'm assuming in some global ranking system. I don't know, and he is saying that he had dropped to number 4 and that he was just hoping to win enough games to get back up to number 2. I don't play MCP competitively. I don't know what any of this means. So,
Or who this
I also
person
know
is.
that I'm like a scrub when it comes to MCP, and that will make itself very apparent later. But I just casually throw out, well, I hope we get paired because I'll give you one of those wins or whatever. And so who do I get paired against in round 1 but Bert Miller, the man who I very sarcastically, not seriously, made this comment to, and then proceed to just by weight of dice and crits and unreasonableness. I mean, I'm not going to say that I don't know how to play the game. I was playing the game.
You definitely should say you don't know how to play the game.
Like I'm making the correct decisions, but then.
So you ended up in the middle?
No, in fact, I did not.
Okay, then you did make the right decisions for the first time ever.
Yeah. So I'm doing things like sending Domino after Black Widow to steal the legacy virus from her because a threat 3 Domino versus a threat 2 Black Widow, as long as I can stay inside of her stealth range, that's a fight that I can win. And I've, doing some other things on the other flank. Like I've got people spread out and trying to score points and doing all of these things.
This very well may have been the best game of MCP you've ever played.
It probably was. But then Colossus just goes ham. And I end up taking that round. I win at 17-12 and, feel bad because now I have made this tongue-in-cheek comment that was not serious at all and then proceeded to not
disrupt his
plan. This guy win.
He ruined his
completely disrupt his plan.
He didn't make cut either.
And then he did not make top 4 for the day.
All because of you.
All because of me. Yep, it's 100% my fault. Thanks,
the
Danny,
Dream
for making me feel really good about
Dream Crusher.
My experience in MCP. So that was round 1. Round 2, I played against Eric, who was bringing Spider Foes with the new Doc Ock, and he proceeded to beat me 17-12 in that round. Game 4 was against Sean O'Malley, who was bringing a Convocation list, but I was very excited, because his models were super well painted. The models looked really good, and then he had done almost like a synth wave on the bases. So he did not paint the traditional concrete pavement sidewalk. All of his bases were super poppy, bright, fun colors and very deliberate too. So if there was an orange model, he included some teal on the base. So there was complementary color on the basing. They looked great, but I was super excited because he brought Namor, and I had purchased Namor and was wavering whether I was going to bring X-Force or X-Men and try to lump Namor in. I had never seen Namor played before, and I saw the strength that was Namor in that game. But that was round 3, and so we ended up tying 14-14, like a true tie, just because we came to time. He had offered to tip the scoring cube 1 spot ahead for me, and I was like, listen, I don't care. It does not matter. If you're here competitively, you can just have the win. And he was like, well, then let's just call it a tie. So we called it a tie. And then my final round was against Dylan Cantrell. And he is probably the best super try-hard opponent I have ever played a game against in my life. Super friendly, super gracious, just welcoming, walking me through everything because he's playing Wakanda and I haven't played against Wakanda. So he walks me through everything that's going on. It turns out that when you have a ton of pushes in your roster and you don't have any anti-push tech as the opponent, then you basically can't hold anything, and Cable is never where he needs to be. So he ends up taking that game from me 18-3, but I learned something in that game that you can throw through yourself. And I didn't know that was a thing you could do. And it's very clearly laid out in the rules, but it doesn't make sense to my head. So, of course, it doesn't make sense like when I see it happen on the tabletop. But it was the one point that a judge was called in any of the games that I played. And at that point, like, we were just going back and forth. He was already beating me pretty soundly. Like, whatever. I think this was in turn 2 or going maybe into turn 3, and I had scored 2 points so far to his whatever he was scoring, like 12 or 13 at this point. And he's like, I appreciate that, but like the amount of points that I score in this game could determine whether I make top 4 or not. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I'm willing to just let you do what you want. And he's like, no, like, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. And this goes again, it speaks to his character, right? Like, I'm questioning something that he's doing. He's willing to call the judge in, even though like the way that he wants to do it is in his favor and he needs the points to make the top cut. So we call the judge over. The judge opens the rule book, reads the rules about throws, ignore intervening terrain and yourself. And I'm like, oh, cool, great. Or whatever it is that it says. But he was able to do what he wanted to do. Yeah, so he ends up beating me 18-3. So I did not accomplish my soft goal for the event to score at least 8 points in every game. I had no hopes of like trying to like go 2-2 or 3-1 or whatever. I think, yeah. So I won one game. So that was nice. But I did not meet my soft goal of scoring 8 points in every game because he just kept pushing me off of the points. And I'm like, I can't score if I'm not there. But all in all, like, I had a good time. The only thing that I will say is that in the future, I don't know that I will be 100% signing up for an AMG sponsored like heat into a cut, only because 4 games of MCP was very draining for me.
Yeah, you could feel it.
3 would have been perfect.
We talked about this afterwards. You could feel it in the room. You could feel it in the room. Like on that 4th game, like it was quiet in there. Like everybody got tired down.
Yep. But that was my MCP. Had a ton of fun. Got all sorts of cool dice, cool cards. I didn't get any cool swag like somebody else.
Well, you had to play so poorly like me to get the free
right.
So, Danny, any highlights for MCP for you?
Well, the door prize was the highlight.
Oh, a door prize.
Door prize was awesome.
It is really cool, actually. I got one of the door prizes, which all the door prizes were official AMG swag. So that's always nice. Like when you get support from the manufacturer of things that like you can't buy anywhere. And so I got a set of range tools for Crisis Protocol that are a really cool, like clear acrylic with a really poppy, bright printing underneath it. And so like, and they each are a little different. Like one is like a spear with a laser coming out of it, and one is like fire and stuff. And the range 2 one is my favorite because it's little Wolverine slashes, which I think was really clever for range 2. But so it got fancy little range rulers that I got to use, which was fun and exciting. But yeah, Crisis Protocol was fun. I share a lot of Jerod's kind of experience. Like my first game, like all my opponents were excellent. Like I didn't come across a single problem throughout the whole time. They were all awesome. The first game I played against X-Force, which is what I play against Jerod a lot. So I was like, all right, cool, X-Force, I know this. My second game was against X-Force as well, but we'll get to that. But he was great and clearly knew what he was doing and like did some things right off the gate that was like, I have never seen an X-Force player do this, and now I don't know how to handle it. And also, the moment that game started, your boy's body was like, hey, you've been having a lot of pizza and fun food and coffees. We might want to get that out of your system right now.
Oh, no.
And so it's like literally like we rolled dice to find priority, and I was like, uh-oh. And so I struggled through that, and he beat me, but was super awesome. Second game, another super nice guy. Best part of that game, though, was his army was X-Force, and they were all in like camouflage. So like that was specific to the region that they're from. He was a military vet, and so like his Colossus had like 80s, Soviet camouflage.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
Yeah, and they were and like somebody else. Like they were all like matching what they were supposed to, like where they were from. And then he had Deadpool, and Deadpool was in camouflage as well, because he was painted up to look exactly like Wolverine. I thought that was
Perfect.
It was really awesome. He had a really fun squad. And that game was really good. I was a little bummed afterwards because I felt like I'd played it pretty well, but ended up losing. And it was really like, I told him to it afterwards. I was like, it's because you were braver, because it was we played portals, and he used the portals, and they worked out. They never bit him once, and he was able to jump around and stole some points late in the game. And I just didn't want to risk it. And, you know, I died a coward's death on that one. And then I played, like, as Trace had hinted at, then I played somebody who had not played Crisis Protocol since January. And so he was very, very new to the game. And I was happy to walk through it. And I like showed him, I was like, have you played against any of these characters? Like, all right, no, like, here's what they do. This is like the one kind of tricky thing, just so you're prepared. And we played a very slow game. And we were only at like maybe just finished the top of turn 2 when they were like 20 minutes. And I was losing, and it was the only moment the whole weekend where I got like in my head, and I was like, I cannot lose this game simply because like we didn't play the game. Like I have to, like, I just can't abide by that. Like I don't know why it was. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I was like, I need to, like, I'm not going to lose this just because he got to play 2 turns and I got to play 1. And so I was like, all right, we're going, like, we're speeding up now. And I kind of put the pedal down and played a really great turn. He had an Ulik that wouldn't die. And so I like eventually just ran away from it and like did some cool things through a building at Baron Zemo, splatted Bob, Hydra Bob, and like it was great. It was a good turn, plunked a bunch of points, won that game. And then the last game was against a really nice guy. Jerod has all these names. I don't remember half of your names. I'm looking at you at the time. So I'm sorry if anybody is like, oh yeah, I played against that guy. I'm sorry I don't remember your names, but I remember your faces and you were all lovely. But he had a really fun Web Warriors list that had had Black Panther, Chosen of Bast in it, and he had the Venomized card, and so he was like, he asked beforehand if it was all right if he did Venomize to like swap out the model with a Venom model. I was like, yeah, of course, that's awesome. And he was very clearly like in the same headspace as me, and so we were kind of like joking through the game because there was a part where like Quill had like got himself in a lot of trouble because I brought Guardians of the Galaxy because of course I did, and Peter Quill had like got himself in a lot of trouble and he had to like run away, and Gamora had to like swing around, and we were joking like she was probably just berating him like as she ran around, like, I told you, you idiot, like don't get in there. And so it was a really fun kind of like, almost, it reminded me of like the old days when we used to hang out at GW, and like because how cinematic 40K can be. MCP doesn't often have that. It'll have moments, but the whole game won't necessarily be cinematic, I don't think, in my opinion. But that reminded me of that because we were just kind of talking through that whole game. And I think the lower energy in the room probably contributed to that because we sat, like we weren't standing to play the game. We were both like sitting in chairs. It was a much more chilled out game. And so I ended up finishing the day 2-2. I finished above Jerod, but simply because I played in the bottom half of the bracket for much longer than he did. So it was not like a testament to my...
No. Like, it's because you're a better MCP player.
Hard no. But I agree with Jerod. Like the swag was cool. Like I'm really glad I have my cool little blue pearlescent dice that are fun. I'm glad I have my shiny infinity gems. I'm glad I have my lucky rangefinder. But whether I do that kind of event again next year will depend on what kind of little shiny MacGuffins they can tempt me with. Otherwise, I probably won't do it because it is a lot. It's a long day. I was very tired afterwards. But
Yep.
That was nothing that a few Red Bulls and like genuine, actual, real life Red Bulls, and then some sodas, quote unquote.
Yes.
Later that night.
Those are coffees.
Coffees,
yeah, it was a great Saturday. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I'm really stoked that you got those awesome acrylic tools. They do look super sweet. I am jealous. I know if I would have played, I probably would have won them. So again, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So
you're not wrong either. That's the worst part.
Yeah.
But that leads us. So we go out to dinner. Trace is still playing this like old world game, like just all day. Like where did he go? We don't know. So we go out. We get some pizza, the same pizza that we ate on Thursday. It's a great shop. Hurry back because I am dead set. Like I am texting Skylar and Davey, like, where is this game going down? something Clocktower, Watchtower. I don't even know. I just
Blood
want
on
to
the
play.
Clock
No,
Tower.
all I know is I want to play. Yes, I just want to play. So we spin this up with not just What the Hex crew, but Wellner Zach from the Madison crew, Jake and his lovely lady, Mary, I believe her name was.
Some of the people from the Atlantis games.
Yeah, Atlantis Games. Uh,
Not Megan.
oh,
Kendall
not Megan.
and Julia.
Yeah.
And
I
Jonathan, maybe?
I don't know. At this point, I had lots of coffee.
Lots of coffee, yeah.
So, this Blood on the Watchtower, Clocktower, this thing we're going to play is very much like Werewolf. And everyone knows I am great at RPGs. But I am super, super excited about this because this is like a social game. This is a game that you have to get in a role and you have to talk. And I'm going to be honest, this was the highlight of my Nova experience. And the reason for that is because this is why I go to Nova. It's later at night, but more importantly, there's a room full of people, like-minded, people that I consider friends. And I really needed like a night like this to right my headspace. Like, so genuinely, anyone that was part of that game, thank you. Like, you made my Nova weekend. And you really helped me get through all that junk of pre-Nova. So, with that, we have to go to sleep at night. We are assigned a role secretively. And you're either a good villager or you work for the imp himself. And then during the day, you get to talk to everyone and try to reveal that what you're doing for the town is helpful and you should slay all the evil doers. But the evil doers aren't exactly truthful.
What?
What? And like I ended up by being the mayor. So all I wanted to do was to get some people killed, but not myself killed. And then if we got down to a couple people, then we would win. I don't know if I played my political game very well, but Jerod, how was it for you?
Yeah, no, so it was a great time. So just to expand on the game a little bit, so it's more complex than Werewolf in that like each of the townspeople has abilities or a specific goal. There are different ways to win the game. Obviously, if you can, take out the main bad guy or all of the bad guys, then the townsfolk will win. As the mayor, if Jason was able to get the population of the town down to 3 people and then stop killing people, then the villagers win. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. I think the highlight for me was watching Jason, who is a self-proclaimed, I'm not going to play an RPG. I don't know how to like embody something else. Like I don't know how to pretend in that way, like really embody his role and role play that out with what are essentially, complete strangers in some cases, and then like new friends in other cases. And that was really cool. And then Danny, the way that you just like full force, like both feet, hip deep in your role.
Look, I'm a theater major, man. You put me on the stage, I'm ready to play.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And it was really cool. I think I was just exhausted, so I wasn't able to like fully engage in the headspace. But it was really cool to try to help Jason get his plan rolling, and then watch like all of the other interactions occur. Like watching people that are clearly like veterans at this kind of game do their thing. Like, yeah, it was a lot of fun and it's super engaging, very social. Definitely like a highlight of the weekend for me as well. Danny,
Danny,
anything?
Danny, your role that you just embraced wholeheartedly.
So I was the I think it was called the hunter.
Slayer. I think you're the
Slayer.
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 You're right. Yeah. And so the Slayer could basically, like, once a game, just take someone out. They could kill someone. And I had never played that game. I'd played enough games like that, like Duke, Duck, Goose, or Goose, Duck, or whatever, and like Among Us and stuff like that. And when you have the role that you can kill someone for like the good guys, I knew well enough that like you don't want to give that away, because then you become like target number one for the bad guys. Because like we'll just take that person off the board and they can't randomly kill us if they catch wind. And so I made the choice against my better judgment, but I was like, I think the way to play this is I'm going to be a recluse. I'm going to be like a tired old Slayer that has, put people out of misery and done good for the town. And I'm going to just stay in my little house every day and every night. But I trust my neighbors. They were Jason and Davey. And I said, you are my war dogs. You go out to the town, you find information. And if you tell me to take the shot, I'll do it. I'll take the shot. And so when other people would like come and talk to me, I would be very cagey. I'd be like, look, I provide a service to this town. It's a grim service. It's one I don't love doing, but I've had to do it for a long time. Kind of just like wouldn't really talk to anybody else. And so I had Jason on one shoulder, who was the person that I didn't trust. And then I had Davey, who I had just met and seemed like a lovely guy, until I learned that Davey was playing me like a fiddle the whole damn game.
The whole time.
Whole game. Just played me beautifully. And though at the end, when I went to take my shot, it wouldn't have mattered because it was not the bad guy. But I was pretty set on taking my shot at somebody who was the informant of the bad guy. And Jason made me change my shot at the last minute, and I shot just a random villager.
Which gave us a ton of information. But damn you, Skylar. So Skylar played me like a fiddle, just like Davey was playing you. And he had set me up by voting. So at night or during the day, you can vote as a town to take somebody out to execute a player. And Skylar voted the same way I did the entire game. And then I didn't talk to this squeak. Until the end of the game, he's like, if you've noticed, I've been looking at you and watching the way that you vote and then vote because I'm the butler. And I was like hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, like, yeah, same.
I was like, okay, like I didn't trust you, but now I do because you have this thing and I know this other thing over here. So that's why we killed a poor innocent person. And
so
then
Davey had been in my pocket like the whole game. And I think Davey, I don't know, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Davey at first didn't necessarily know what I was. I think he thought I was a healer, because at one point, I think it was like the second night, he was like, hey, can you protect Skylar? And I was like, that's not the job I do, brother. Like I do the opposite of that. And he was like, oh, okay. And so I think his strategy maybe changed halfway through. And so that might've also contributed to why I followed him, because like I wasn't like congruously being led to this, like, oh, this guy's just selling me up the river. And he was very much like, he was like, well, I know some people are suspicious of Davey. Let me go back. And he just slow played me. Cause I think once he knew that I was the hunter or the Slayer, he was like, well, if I can just get him to never take the shot, then he might as well not be in the game, basically.
Yeah.
And so like, he just kind of slow played me and like kind of was wishy-washy about things for a long time. And then only to find out I'd been sitting next to the imp himself. I think he was the like number 2 was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Davey was the number 2. Skylar was the number 1 or 2.
3.
He was 3. He was the informant.
Yeah.
And then poor Mary, who I like, she likes like, you're a liar. No, I'm like, you're a liar.
She was the only time I talked, because after I'd taken the shot, I was like, you know what? Like now there's no risk. Like everybody knows what I am. I'm going to have so I'll go out and chit chat. And she was her and her partner were the only people I chatted to in the whole week of this fiasco in our little village. And her partner seemed perfectly normal and trustworthy. She was kind of weird and like not weird, but like the way she was like answering questions like was not like it didn't line up with what I thought she was saying. And so I was on Jason's boat. I was like, no, yep, she is the problem. Like, she's got to go.
So that we execute her and the game ends. Because it turns out, Mary, you're a saint.
Yep.
But your partner, Jake, dirty Jake, Squid Jake from Discord, you, sir, are the real evil of the room. And to just do that to Mary, to play her,
get ganked,
and just, she's a saint, and you just let her die, you dog. And Skylar and Davey, if I could swear on this podcast, I would. And Wellner, I'm sorry I never believed you, but I thought you were wrapped up in it the entire time. So the beauty of this game is just the social discourse. Like, it is like so fun to watch people and how they interact. That's mostly what I did all night long, to see the conversations, to see the glances in the eyes, and the distrust. It turns out that if you only give humans a little bit of information, we don't trust anyone. There's just no trust in this world. And Trace, as a silent observer to this madness, was it as funny as I think it was?
It was pretty comical. I did not participate in this because my brain was cooked after my 3 games of Old World for the day. So I walked in, I had some popcorn, and I had a nice beverage, and just kind of sat and watched all of this play out. And it was interesting to see the night phases, because I got to see when everybody was asleep, like, who would get pointed to, who would like get their notes or whatever. So that was a very interesting part of the game that I really enjoyed just observing. Watching Danny slay their incorrect person was interesting. I was like, ooh, that didn't go well. Did not go how I was convinced. I was not paying very close attention because I was talking to Phil for most of the game, which I always enjoy talking to Phil. He's a great conversationalist, and he and I both work in the same system as part of our job. He works for the vendor. I work as a customer for from the vendor. So it's always interesting to have a conversation with Phil about work, even if we're in a place talking about games. But yes, and then I think my favorite moment of the night is when everybody was asleep, and I actually leaned forward to Davey and I go, "I'm the grave digger," and he just he jumped almost through the roof. I scared him so bad, and I was like, "I'm sorry, I just had to. You were right there." So that was a fun interaction too. But it was a really interesting silent observer moment for me, just to watch how everybody interacted with each other. It was I could tell Jerod's batteries were drained because he was not as boisterous as he normally would be. And I was like, okay, Jerod's tired. Jason was in it, like straight in it.
Yeah.
And that was, like Jerod said, it was really fun to watch Jason kind of embrace that RPG role that he claims that he's not good at.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I like to win too. So game,
kind of a big deal.
Kind of get it done. So
yeah, it was fun. It was fun to do. I do have one little side comment because my wife texted me or called me, and she's like, "Are you at Nova?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Jerod and Danny are posting pictures, and Jason's posting. All of it. Everybody's there, but you're not in any pictures." And I was like, "I was in an event all day." So Jenny was convinced that I was not even at Nova on Saturday.
That's funny.
That's funny.
Because it was when you guys had your Marvel shirts on, and y'all were doing selfies with each other, and I was like, I'm not in any of these pictures, and that's okay because I'm doing battle in the old world. So
yeah, you were.
But yeah, it was a cool day. I really enjoyed watching, even though I didn't participate. That was just as enjoyable for me as it was for you guys to play. So
Well, just closes out there, Trace. So we're going to just move right into Sunday, our last day at Nova, and you have to finish up a couple rounds of Old World.
Yep.
Now, so how'd that go?
I did not finish on day 2 how I had hoped. After having a strong opening day, my day 2 of Old World did not go quite as planned, but that's okay. Because like I said, Warhammer gonna Warhammer. The first game was actually a very interesting setup. We were actually only about 18 to 20 inches away from each other, and I was playing against a dwarf player who has lots of guns. There are lots of guns in a dwarf army. We deploy, we set up our Vanguard units, which Vanguard in the game is you get a free move before the game starts. So like you can advance some units up and be a little bit more advantageous position. We deploy. He wins the roll off because he finishes deploying before me, goes first, shoots the ever loving crap out of my army. And then I go on my first turn. I fail every single charge that I try and make with my army, which if you're playing a melee focused army like you are playing with Khorne, it does not go well. So I failed all those charges. He overwatched me or stand and shot me with all those. Then proceeded to not get in contact with him. So then he had another turn of shooting. And then I did get in combat, which he still got to shoot me again when he stand and shot me again. So most of my army was heavily depleted by the end of the game or by the middle of the game. And then I'm trying to fight dwarves, which have all the different save stacking and resilience and stubborn and not moving anywhere. And so I was not making any headway. So that game was very, very, very borked from the beginning. I was happy to have that one done. That was my the person I was playing was probably my only low point of the weekend because he was very clearly winning the game, and I had a clear flank charge with my Bloodthirster into one of his units, and he tried to like get technical with me, and I was like, really? This game is clearly in your favor, and you're not going to let me play with a toy. Kind of like Danny's experience with the competitive player on his Bloodbowl.
Yeah.
It was one of those moments, and I walked over and I was like, this is clearly a flank charge. Like I'm taking it. But that was how that game went. And then my final game was against a Warriors of Chaos player, which is a very difficult matchup for me because almost all of their weapons are magical, which goes right through all of my defensive capabilities as a Demons player. And that game, I can kind of pinpoint one particular moment right at the beginning of the game where I knew I was in trouble. All the Khorne demons have a rule called Impetuous, which is just a 50-50 die roll. If you roll under a 4, if you roll a 1, 2, or 3, you have to declare a charge if you are able to. And on a 4 or higher, you can act as normal. And I roll all of my Impetuous rolls. I fail a couple, which are not that big of a deal. But then I get to my Bloodthirster, who has a chariot very clearly in range. It's about 19 inches away. I fail my Impetuous check, and he just goes barreling as far as he could go up the board, leaving himself quite clearly out of position. He then gets charged by the chariot. I kill the chariot, which is not that big of a deal. And then I have a unit of Furies that are in a giant that are trying to stall a giant for a turn. He kills all of those Furies to a man and then overruns into my Bloodthirster and then does all these things that require him not to hit at all. They just do, the attacks just hit and he does damage. And so my Bloodthirster is sitting there with, who's my general of my army, very important piece, very hard hitting. And he's sitting there on 1 wound. And then the next turn comes around. I don't kill the giant. He kills me instead, and I'm like, that's probably the game. And that's at like the bottom of turn 2.
Ooh.
Rough.
And I was like, that's probably the game. And then he had some other units that just basically folded my entire flank, just daisy chained into the next fight. And I just couldn't get away. And so I kind of saved face at the end of that game and kind of ran some units off the board, just to try and save on points and save us time and, get around and talk to people and watch some other games and stuff like that. So he was an awesome opponent. Had a great time playing him. It's just the dice were not in my favor that game. And I got really out of position really quickly due to some of this, the 50-50 rolls, which is fine. It's kind of what I expected to happen at least one game. But yeah, so that's kind of the end of the Old World tournament. I will say I was only 1 point shy of getting the Best Sport award for that tournament.
Nice.
Heck yeah.
I got a 24 out of 25. There were 2 people who tied for 25. But I was the only one even remotely close. Everybody else was like in the teens. So I felt very good about that, about trying to live my mantra of playing with my opponent, not against my opponent. And I think that kind of paid off. Met some really cool people at the tournament. A guy who's been doing some demons YouTubing. His name is Yongdu Kim. He is the one who actually won Best Painted for the tournament. It was a really, really cool event. I got to see a lot of really cool armies. The hobby was, as Warhammer Fantasy has always been, very high standard. So that was just a lot of fun to see. Did not win a sword, which was one of the rewards for the tournament. The top 3 people and best overall all got swords, actual swords, as their trophies, which was pretty cool. I got like a door prize, which is like a little like turn counter or whatever. But overall, it was a really fun event. I will definitely partake next year, hopefully with some more games under my belt and an army that had a slightly more time spent on it. I kind of blitzed into the demons kind of last minute, well, about a month ahead of the tournament, because everybody and their brother was playing Warriors of Chaos, and I was not going to add to that pile. So it was fun to play something different and give people something else to play against. But I really, really enjoyed it. I'm glad that I played. Yep.
Sounds awesome.
Yep.
So that concludes everyone else's event, because on Sunday, Danny hung out with me, except Sunday is the day that we go for the Underworlds tournament. So I'm just going to do this real quick. We had 35 people signed up. Only 2 did not show. That left us with 33. And I had mentioned before that I was not going to go through what we went through last year, where we had someone travel in from out of state. Brian from What the Hex came in and took a first round bye. I told the TO that early. And so I basically dropped from the tournament, but hung around in case pairings got off again. The Underworlds tournament, we go to Nova every year, but I want to be very, very clear. Like up to this point, we have not been affiliated with Nova. Like, we don't have anything to do with like the TOs or the event setups or prize support or anything that the event has going on. We just truly love the convention. We love the people that put the convention on. But the Underworlds tournament, having this many people at 32 players, is the largest post-COVID North American tournament. And it was a thing of pride. So we have been in the Underworlds community for over 7 years now, both locally and throughout this podcast. And to see the game that it has become, and that 32 people showed up to play at Nova, which we consider the event that we go to every year, was truly like humbling and exciting to see that the game is on the uptick, that the community is great and thriving. And even to step back and not play, like there were moments in round 1 where I was just watching and in awe of everyone that was there. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for embracing Underworlds and really driving it to what it can be. And I will say that with all the investment personally that I've put into the game over the years, it was truly a completionist moment to see the state of the game that it is now, with Nemesis, with the warbands that are out, being a completely different meta than what even I had predicted going into it, was just awesome, rewarding. So thank you all. So with that, Jerod, I'm not playing in it. I'm just hanging out. I do have other notes that I'll interject, but what's your take on the tournament?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just echo the fact that it's awesome that there were, 35 tickets sold, 33 people showed up to play. Kudos to you for, continuing to be, a champion of the game and the community, for making it so that there were no buys. And what you haven't said is that as other players dropped, you came back in and basically played as the ringer. So everybody that was at the tournament had a player to play against in their round, which is awesome. So I had been planning on bringing Headcracker with Breakneck Slaughter, and that Breakneck Slaughter seemed to be kind of at the top of the meta prior to Nova until the FAQ dropped. But event-wise, because that was what you asked, it was great and it was awesome. It was cool to see as many people there that were there, and looking at the field, like this may have been
a lot of good
the
players.
most stacked event for Underworlds this year, as far as the caliber of players that showed up. The Northeast crew, Northbeast crew came in force, all great players, prominent. I think there were 7 golden ticket holders at the event.
There was a lot. It was 5 or 7. There's a lot.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I mean, it was just cool to see, and it was cool to see like the spread of players that were there. It was cool to see people that we played against last year show up again and like have clearly improved their game. So yeah, I mean, just overall event wise, yeah, like it was super exciting. The energy was really good throughout the day. Yeah.
So awesome. So we sit down and so you mentioned I came back in. So my first apology of the day is to Craig. So that is the person that I came in to be the ringer against. Great games. He took it 2-1 over Godsworn Hunt. But afterwards I got into like a in-depth conversation that I thought was going one way, and I Jasoned it, and I definitely came off as a jerk. So Craig, sorry that conversation went there. The other game I got to play was against our local Jake in the 5th round, who had not won one game. So complete reverse of what he had experienced in his last Nova. So I was lucky that I took game 1 from him, and I think he got a little nervous, but he had this awesome Sereni's deck that was able to score even though I wiped him off the board. So the Godsworn Hunt cleared him twice, and he still managed to take those next 2 games from me. So good job, Jake, for putting Godsworn where they belong. The other thing that I learned too about the event, so I tried to help TO because the TO was so just new to the game, like he basics, but not a seasoned player, is that as a community, as GW believes like these erratas and FAQs all seem great, but for a new player, they suck. There was one player at the event was playing Tooth and Claw, but it had an old rule book, so he thought that he could put large upgrades onto wound fighters and make them large and that they would stay. That was not a good experience for that person, and it was no fault of their own because the rulebook that they had was not clear. And when you go through the FAQ, it's been removed from the FAQ because it is now in the new rulebook. So also too, like just looking at weird interactions, like the fact that we have so many documents, it is not easy in the spur of the moment to look up a supporting document to make a ruling. And then again, flipping back from the rulebook to those supporting documents. Like there was questions on timing, another question on hexes, and like a lot of things I know were in the FAQ, but now are in the rulebook. So even though I love the game and we're in a great place, if you're not fully committed or like myself brushed up on all of the interactions to be a TO, it can be cumbersome. So just take that as a takeaway. Some other observations as I wasn't playing that I really want to point out is I don't think we talk enough about token placement. So as you're at the table, like where do you put your cards? Where do you put your tokens that are on your cards? Where do you put your upgrades? I saw some great ideas out there. Like Phil from What the Hex, he was playing Skinnerkin, and he actually had the Skinnerkin Warband card with his fighter cards and put the haunch counters on that card, which I thought, like, normally for me when I play them, they're just like random tokens floating around, right? Zach from the Madison crew had like cool little like ham bones as like different counters that really helped identify anything that wasn't a normal token or counter. And then one of the coolest things that I saw was when Davey and Phil were playing. So we all have these foldable dice trays, right? Like 4 sides, but when you're sitting at a table, can your opponent always see all your dice?
No,
right? They got to kind of like lean up and look. So they unbuckle the front 2 sides, like facing the tail, like facing the boards and facing their opponent. And when they roll on the back 2 sides that are folded up, so you can clearly see the dice as your opponent. So those are like some key observations that I made while playing, and just wanted to call out. But Jerod, what did you take and play with? You took Headcracker?
I did. I took Headcracker, and like I said, the plan was Breakneck Slaughter, and then the FAQ came out, and some of my in-phase scoring wasn't as reliable as it was anymore. So I actually paired them with Rhymelock Relics, and I mean, it worked well enough. It didn't, take me to the podium or anything, but it was also a change that I made like 2 weeks prior to the event. But I'll just run through my games.
Yeah, some highlights
pretty quickly. Yeah. So round 1, I get paired with George Kairos from Path to Glory. It was a great game. In game 1, he's taking Drum with Rhymelock Relics. So game 1, I think we spent the first 3 activations each drawing power cards. So it felt like a classic Jason game. Where I'll just draw a power card. I'll draw a power card. I'll draw a power card. So it was a little cagey, but I ended up taking that one 14-9. We go into game 2, and he gets a great a charge with Herax onto Headcracker, smacks 2 damage onto Headcracker, and then plays a card where he can't be pushed, and he sacrifices a Blood Tithe counter so that like it lasts for the rest of the game or the rest of the round. And then he plays Glacial Advance from the Rhymelock deck, which pushes 2 of your fighters onto objective tokens and then gives them charge tokens. So now Herax is right next to Headcracker, who's already got 2 wounds on him and can't be driven back. And I think Headcracker had already charged to try to put some damage on him anyway. So he takes out Headcracker in his second activation. Yeah, and so I try to scramble back. I end up taking out Herax. I get Primacy, but I don't really score anything. So game 2, we're going into we're on the second activation of Action Phase 2. And I've got 2 glory and no path to victory. So I just say, okay, I'll just concede. And so the ruling for the event was that if your opponent concedes, then you just score the cards that you have in your hand and you move on to the next game, or the round is over, whatever the case is. So George took that game 10-2, and then we go into game 3. And the reason that I scooped is because I wanted the chance to actually get into game 3 to try to squeak the win out instead of getting a tie. And so we get rushed. It's back and forth. It's super tight. And then we get into like the third action phase, and the TO comes over and says, okay, you have like, I need scores in like 7 minutes. And we're like, okay. So we like rush through. And, we talked through it kind of at the end, right before we had to get up and go get to our next seats. But I think had we not been rushed, George may have made some different decisions, like on timing is when he played things. But I ended up taking the third game, 17-14. So tie on glory differential. So we're both 33 glory total, but I get the round win. And then, so my next 3 games are all ties. So I play against Tony Kopak, who's got Sepulchral Guard with Rhymelock Relics. I take game 1. He takes game 2. I think maybe there was a play I could have done. It's after the fact. You can't change things now. I maybe could have done 2 activations differently in game 2 to take the win. But we end up with a true tie there, just because, we were playing the games out and we tie things out. Game 3, I play against Eugene, who was the other Velmorn player from last year. And he's got Dreepers, Wraith Creepers with Breakneck Slaughter, which is not a great pairing for Headcracker, just because of the range 2 and all of the pushes. Like, he can kind of get his fighters wherever they want to go. If you want to hear about all of the strengths of Dreeper, you should go back and listen to our last episode as we talked to Jerod and his pairing that ended up winning Nova. But he takes game 1, and then game 2 he sets up, he longsboards me, but he kind of deploys in the back. And so I actually am able to score a lot of my passive just stand on stuff cards early, which lets me get a bunch of upgrades out. So I get kind of tooled up and end up taking the second game from him in that one. Game 4, I play against Guillaume G in the Discords. He has brought Rhymelocked Relics with Crimson Court, which was a pairing I was considering. He absolutely shellacks me game 1, takes it 14-2, and then I squeak out a 17-16 win against him in game 2. So that puts us at a tie again because we just don't have time. And then game 5, I play against Blake, who has brought Tooth and Claw Hexbane. And let me tell you, that Woodcutter's Axe
is the greatest upgrade ever.
It is the greatest upgrade ever, especially if you're facing Headcracker and Primacy is in play, because it's real easy to one-shot when you're rolling like 4 and 5 dice, hitting on hammers and singles, and all of your successes pump the damage by 1. So he beats me pretty handily in both of those games. He's just able to apply a lot of pressure that I didn't have a plan. I had not mentally prepared for like that hard of an aggro. So I just kind of floundered in what I should have been doing to play against it. So that ended up in a round loss for me. So I went 1-1-3 on the day. Had a lot of fun.
All went 1-3-1.
1-3-1. 3 ties. Ties are in the middle?
No, they're at the end, but I'm just poking fun at Brian.
At Brian. No, nice. Yeah, but I had a great time. Like, played against strong opponents. All of my games were great. Nothing ever got hairy or weird. I had a great time. Enjoyed every game that I played. And then, so if you haven't listened to the What the Hex Nova recap, Phil kind of said this, and I had said very early in the year that like it would be really cool to win a ticket to the World Championships. Did not really put the effort forth to make that happen. And so like Phil, I think when it comes to the game of Underworlds, I probably need to kind of re-level set my goals for the game. And one of those, and it has always been this, is to make sure that like I'm a good opponent, that my opponents have a good time. It's an enjoyable experience. That I'm being the best sport that I can in any moment, that I'm celebrating their wins. And I tried to do that, whatever I can. There were a ton of like single die crit deaths against me. So my opponent rolls it, that I'm, giving, knuckles across the table or high fives or, celebrating those. But Yeah. So I just think going forward, shifting my efforts more towards maintaining and growing the community, trying to make sure that, we're continuing to build resources for the community to help people get into the game and really spending my efforts there, still enjoying the game, playing at the most competitive level that I can, but understanding that like my ability to put time in to win a tournament, especially a tournament where there are 7 championship ticket holders already, may not be reasonable for me. And that's okay.
Yeah, that is okay. And that kind of leads us to, the overall structure of Nova has always been, well, it hasn't always been, since post-COVID has been a single day, right? On Sunday, it's 5 games, 90-minute rounds to slam them in there, which most games end up by going the extra 15 for the break. We just can't have that anymore if we're going to continue to get 32 plus people. And like unknowing to each other, we had conversations with the TO at the event saying like next year we're just going to do it. Like, we only get to go to one tournament like this a year for us. But I do think that we're both at that point that the community being strong and being supported is really more rewarding than us going mid-table and hoping we get golden tickets, right? So we are, Jerod has already reached out to Nova for next year. We've kind of made that connection. We'll dial more things in as the winter kind of goes through here. But next year, like we already are working on making sure that there are proper round times, that there is proper rules for conceding games to get to the third game. And we will be more in the organizer role and TO role next year when you all head out to Nova. It may, like right now, it looks like it's going to be 2 days, but we'll work through all those logistics as we get closer. The other highlight that I cannot not mention came during the games. And for those of you that don't know, Davey brought his younger son, Emmett. Emmett played in the full tournament playing Thunderix. And after one round, he very briskly comes up to me and just stands there and stares at me. He's got this smile from like ear to ear, just stares at me. I'm like, what's going on? And he had won a game, not the full round, but won a game with Thunderix at Nova. And I will tell you that it just lit up my day to see the next generation of gamer enjoying a game that I've put so much time into. It was awesome, and it will stay with me for a very, very long time. So good job out there, Emmett, and Davey, good job raising a good one. So any other comments about the Underworlds tournament, Jerod?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you to all our opponents. More importantly, thank you to the wonderful community that came out to support the tournament. As soon as the tournament ended, we got to see Jerod get his golden ticket, and then we jumped in the car and we headed home. So with that, we will take a break and come back to close out this 3-hour show.
And we're back, and that will wrap up the 70th episode of the Battle Mallet podcast. We just want to take the time to say thank you for listening. We enjoy being able to make this content. We hope that it is useful and helpful. If you enjoyed what you've heard, we'd appreciate any likes, reviews, subscribes that you can do. If you're interested in seeing what we're producing visually, we have a ton of pictures from the Nova Open Convention and then throughout our events and gatherings and games that we play throughout the year. We are Battle Mallet 1 on X. We are Battle Mallet PCast on Instagram. We are Battle Mallet Podcast on Facebook. We post pictures there. We also have a Discord, so if you're local to the North Carolina area, we strongly encourage you to join because we're often hosting local events. If you're interested in playing some Space Marine 2, you should also join, because we'll probably be doing that for the next 3 weeks. But you can also enjoy, conversations around Underworlds, around hobbying. We have hobby channels there as well. So I'd encourage you to join that. It gives you a chance to engage with us. We are looking forward, to continuing to produce content for Underworlds, to continue to build the library. All of the top 8 decks from Nova are in the library already. So I think that's it.
No, it's not it.
It's not it. Well, I was going to ask if closing thoughts, other community shout outs we missed.
Yeah.
So Jason has some closing thoughts or community shout outs, or both?
I got both. So again, thank you to everyone that came. Shout out to What the Hex, listen to their episode. Shout out to Path to Glory, listen to their episode, right? Like great recaps on Nova. But it is the conclusion of the Nova season. It is the conclusion of our trip. Trace, are you going back again next year?
That's the plan.
That's the plan, Stan. We're sticking to it. Danny, for the first time in a few years, you went the entire week with us to Nova. All 5, 6, 27 days. Next year, are you going for the full week again?
To quote a great man, that's the plan.
And Jerod, if we're signing up for all this, you are coming, right? You're not going to leave this all for me to do.
I mean, it's tempting, but yeah, I'll be there.
All right, awesome. Well, then I guess next week we start recording our plans for the road to Nova 2025.
So for the Battle Mallet podcast, we are 3 dads and a pirate angel.
Calling it back.
Love that.
This is Jerod signing out.
It's Trace signing out.
This is Danny, a former pirate angel. Angel no more, signing out. Thanks for having me back, guys. You could have spent 3 hours watching The Godfather, but you chatted with me instead.
Right. And I'm Jason Table New Murray. Get the hell out of here.
Peace.
Go Bills.
The Battle Mallet podcast is protected under the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find more information via links on podcast.battle-mallet.com. Music by Anno Domini Beats.
Jason's helping.
Yeah,
Super helpful.
It's usually what happens.